Great. Thanks, Stuart. Evening, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining us tonight. So this is Scottish Power Platform User Group's event, the Halloween special. So thank you very much for your time this evening. For those of you who are new to the user group, it's run by Charlie Phipps, who sends his apologies. He's going to be a bit busy on and off this evening. Stuart Baxter and myself, Keith Atherton. A bit about us. Our mission is to create a welcoming and inclusive space for all individuals interested in the Power Platform. If anyone else is interested in speaking going forward, the website is undergoing maintenance at the moment, but just feel free to contact either me, Stuart, or Charlie direct on LinkedIn. So we've got some really awesome speakers tonight, and just a bit as well to say we've got a code of conduct as well. The short version is just be respectful to everyone. I'm sure we can, everyone here is okay with that. But if anyone's got any issues, just come and speak to either me, Stuart, or Charlie. Okay, so I think we're ready for our first speaker. Are we ready to go? And if you'd like to just go ahead and share your screen.
Super quickly, just before, while Agnius is bringing that up, there seems to be a weird update happening to Teams. Everyone's mics are off. If anyone does have any questions, do stick your hand up or drop a message in the chat, and I will bring you in to be able to speak. I haven't quite figured out what it's done, so just in case there's any questions, stick a hand up or a message in the chat for us, please.
Great, thanks, Stuart.
Thanks, folks. Over to you, Agnius.
Cool. So can you see my screen now?
Looking good.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you for joining me and the rest of the awesome speaker lineup for today's Halloween special of the Scottish Power Platform User Group meetup. And I'm here just gonna switch my slide and see if that still works. You're seeing a next slide, right? Because that's always tricky with slideshows. Cool. Anyway, so I'm here to hopefully not scare you with a pretty advanced topic on error handling and logging in Power Automate Desktop. And the reason why I speak of this is the fact that unfortunately, Power Automate Desktop does not actually have a proper out-of-the-box framework for handling errors and logging anything yet, at least. And as such, everyone essentially has to build their own framework of sorts when they started working with Power Automate Desktop. And since it's a low-code tool, lots of non-technical users, lots of citizen developers, non-IT background users eventually end up using it, who don't necessarily know how to build a proper error handling framework, or don't even consider the need to actually do it. And as such, I'm actually trying to share a proper way to do it. And I think I can say that I know a thing or two about Power Automate Desktop. I'm essentially the most experienced Power Automate Desktop user in Lithuania. I've trained most of the others. I'm also one of the most knowledgeable Power Automate Desktop user globally, and the top solution also in the Microsoft Power Platform community for Power Automate Desktop all time. So yeah, I think I know a thing or two about Power Automate Desktop, and yeah, let me just share some of that knowledge with you. Now, the agenda for today is that I'll share a couple of slides, just a few of them, where I take you through the basics of how to handle errors and log messages in Power Automate Desktop. And then the majority of the session will actually be demos of me showing you how to do that in Power Automate Desktop. And then at the end, if I manage to squeeze this in less than 45 minutes, we might have some time for Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions during the session, feel free to drop them in the chat, and I think we can cover that at the end during Q&A. So without further ado, there are essentially three ways in which we can handle errors in Power Automate Desktop. One of them is being, no error handling, which is obviously a bad idea. It essentially will mean that your flows will fail at the first error. So, not recommended. Just, I won't really speak much more of that. Just don't do it. The other way is action level error handling, which essentially means that we can set special rules on how to handle errors on each separate action, which is obviously better than no error handling, but still not really recommended, except for some special cases, which I'll actually explain in a minute. And the actually recommended way of doing it is using error blocks, or the so-called on-block error action in Power Automate Desktop, which allows setting those rules for handling errors on blocks or groups of actions or entire subflows, which is clearly the recommended way because of that. Now, action level error handling is still very powerful and is worth a mention. You can set various rules to every single, or well, most actions. You can make set variables, run subflows. You can have retry policies, and you can even have different rules applying to different types of exceptions based on the context of the action. So, for instance, the execute SQL statement action will have 3 different types of exceptions that Power Automate Desktop would expect. And we could set different rules for each of those, which is quite powerful if we actually need something like that. But there are some drawbacks with this approach, and the main of them are, well, first of all, the fact that it's quite time-consuming and tedious to build a flow like that or maintain it. So, imagine an actual business process flow with lots of actions, lots of subflows. Implementing error handling on each of those actions will take a lot of time, and then maintaining something like that will also be quite time consuming. But an even bigger issue with this is the fact that we can't really handle all errors this way, because first of all, some of the actions do not even have the on error rules at all. So for instance, set variable does not have it, can still fail. And this approach cannot handle the so-called unexpected logic errors, which are exceptions like the index out of range exception or the data table does not contain column name something exception. These sorts of exceptions can happen even in actions that do have error handling options. They would still make the flow fail even if we set an action, for instance, the execute SQL statement action, even if we set all errors to be handled. But if we make it possible for an unexpected logic error to happen on this action, it would still make the entire flow stop because it will not be handled. And that essentially means that this approach cannot actually help us build a robust flow with all errors being handled without actually resorting to extensive logic around it so that we prevent the exceptions from happening in the first place. So that's why it's not recommended. But it is useful when we do actually use the recommended approach, which is the error blocks, but we want 1 or 2 actions handled differently from the rest of the block. And that's because action level error handling takes priority over the error block. So if an action within the block actually fails, and it has the rules set on the action level, they will kick in first. And if they are then set to throw an error afterwards, only then the actual block error will also kick in. So that might be useful. Me and my team, we frequently use this, for instance, with the wait for something action. So like wait for window, wait for web page content, wait for image or file or something like that. So the reason we do it is because we don't want our flows to actually wait infinitely for something like that. And so we set them to fail on timeout. But when that happens, all we get is a message that says timeout has expired, regardless of which action we use. And that's pretty useless. So we usually will make the action continue the flow run without throwing an error. And then we will put in a condition afterwards that checks whether the item that we've been waiting for has actually appeared or disappeared, and then throw a more custom, more useful message. That's a case in which we actually use this functionality, the action level error handling. I'm sure you can think of cases in your businesses where it might apply, but the general rule is still that we only use it in exceptional cases for some special actions that need to be handled differently, while we handle everything else with the actually recommended way of doing it, which is the error block. And the reason it's the recommended way is because, well, it's still very powerful. We can still have all of those rules. It's much easier to set up and maintain because we only need to set the rules once per group of actions, per subflow. Ironically, it can actually handle subflows that are called from within the block. So if you're feeling extremely lazy, you could actually just have a single block in main that handles the entire flow, which is not recommended, obviously, because that would essentially mean the same as having no error handling. Your flow will fail on the first error, but it's still possible to do that. And even more importantly, it can handle all exceptions, including unexpected logic errors, if we enable this little toggle over here, which for some reason is disabled by default. I have no idea why Microsoft would do that, but if we enable this, then it can actually handle everything. And that's essentially the only way to handle all exceptions in Power Automate Desktop. That's why it is the recommended way of doing it. Yes, it does have some drawbacks, mainly the fact that there's some less options. It currently doesn't have the retry policies. It will also mean that all of the same rules will actually apply to all of the actions, meaning we don't get to set custom error messages in here, and we don't have the possibility of actually having different handling per type of exception based on the context of the action. But those can actually be worked around via specific subflows, specific actions, which I'll actually show you during the demo. And really, those are not that bad when compared to the actual possibility to handle all error. And that essentially covers the error handling part. And while that's cool, even if we handle all errors, but don't log anything, it would still be quite difficult for us to figure out what happened and why, and then fix the issue. So logging is actually just as important as handling errors. Now, since a couple of months ago, Power Automate Desktop has an action called log message, which in my personal opinion is completely useless. The reason why I think that is because all it does is it logs an extra message to the flow run action details in the cloud portal, which means two things. First of all, it's a premium feature, which maybe not a huge issue, but it also means that it's quite difficult to use. Because if you've ever used that, if you've ever looked at the flow run action details, you know what I mean. The interface is, well, it's bad. It's slow, it's laggy, it lacks basic filtering functionalities. It essentially has too much info in there, and it's really hard to find anything useful in there. So as such, using log message is probably better than no logging, but pretty much any custom logging alternative will always be better than using. And I've seen quite a few different custom logging alternatives over the years. Some of my favorites and those that I think are the best are listed in here. So, for instance, using databases like SQL databases, which is quite great for technical people, not so great for business users. So we might essentially have to resort to building an interface on top of it to make it more user-friendly, or logging to SharePoint lists, which is essentially an interface on top of a database, so it is more user-friendly. Or logging to simple local files like CSV or plain text files, which is much easier to implement and also relatively user-friendly. Now, my personal favorite, that's, I think, a matter of preference, is using plain text files. And the reason why I like that is because they're very easy to set up in Power Automate Desktop. Pad actually has this wondrous action called write text to file, which will create a file if it doesn't exist, or append a new line to a file if it does exist. So essentially, it's very simple. You could just have a single action doing all the logs for you. It doesn't require any headers or anything like that, unlike CSV files, and it's much less likely to fail due to application errors than logging to databases or SharePoint lists. The one drawback of this approach is obviously the fact that the files are actually local to the machine on which the flows run. And remember, we're talking about tester flows. So that means that we need to access to the production environment to actually see them, unless we push them to a network location or some monitoring software, which I'll actually show you during the demo. And at that, it's time for me to, well, not really stop talking, but stop using the slides, and I'll switch to the demo. And let's just quickly try this, right? Okay, so, well, for the purpose of this demo, when I was thinking of what to build, I thought I'll build something of a personal project, more of a thing, not really a business project. And at that, I thought I'd like to buy something nice for my wife because I love her. And yeah, well, I think nothing says I love you better than a bouquet of flowers, right? But since I know my wife and I know what she likes, it's actually not really a bouquet of flowers, but instead a bouquet of Lego flowers because she loves Lego. And so I found this nice set, which I'm sure she would love. I've done my research, obviously. And well, it's a bit pricey. That wouldn't really be an issue. But because I needed a flow, I thought, why not scrape this page until it actually is on sale? Because I know Lego.com does sales every now and then I could grab it at a discount. Now I've done my research. I know when there's a sale, there's a separate element over here that shows the discount price. I've actually checked the page source of this page, and ironically, it does actually have a sales price, even though there's no sales available. So I can't really use that. I actually need to resort to scraping the user interface. And to do that, I actually needed to find another product that is on sale first. So I navigated to another page called Sales and Deals. And I found this nice Atari set and figured, yeah, well, why not use this for the demo? So I can see an actual normal price and a discount price in here, and I can build a flow that actually scrapes this. But me being me, as I was actually navigating through the Lego.com page, I found plenty of other sets I would like for myself. And since I'm already building a flow that scrapes their prices, I thought, well, why not use it for my own personal use? And so I've built a list. For the purpose of simplicity, I put the list into Excel, and I've got some products over here that I would like for myself. These are just product numbers that Lego uses to identify their sets. So one of these is the actual bouquet of flowers. The last one is the Atari set, which is, just for the purpose of the demo. So they actually have something that is on sale. The others are just some other sets I would really like to have myself. And then I've built a couple of flows. I've built them already because if I were actually building them during the session, this wouldn't really be a 45-minute session. This would really be more of a full-day workshop at best, which I'm actually trying to sell to some events next year, but not yet, unfortunately. Anyway, so I've built a couple of flows. Now, the reason I have two is because I like the single responsibility principle of software programming and the separation of duties principles. These essentially mean, that I like my flows to do one thing. So there is a flow called work item generator. This flow will simply generate work items for me. It will read the Excel file, and then it will create a work item for each of those products in my SQLite database. That's essentially similar to the work queue functionality in Power Automate, but I decided to use my own database because it's more versatile. The work queue functionality is not mature yet enough. I've been using our own SQL databases, actually SQL Server, Transact SQL, or Postgres SQL or SQLite or whatever works best for our use cases. They're more flexible, and until the work queues are actually worthy, I'm sticking to these. Anyway, so this will just create a work item.
Agnius, sorry to cut across, mate. We've got a hand up from Himanshu.
Yeah.
I think maybe a question. Himanshu, go ahead, mate. Himanshu, we can't hear you, mate.
Hello.
Yep, can hear you now. Perfect.
So, am I audible?
Yep.
Yep.
So my question is, you have created two bots. First is demo work item processor. Second is demo work item generator. So my question is, why not you have integrated demo work item generator inside the demo work item processor? You can still maintain the modularity of the code. So this is my question.
Yeah, well, that's just my own personal preference. The actual order of them is different. This is the first one, but yeah, anyway, that's just my own personal preference. Like I mentioned, I prefer my flows to be modular in a way where I can run the generator and it runs, and then if the processor fails for some reason, I just can rerun this part of the flow and it will still run on the work items that have been generated by the previous flow without actually having to rerun all of it and roll back my database or something like that. That's the way I like it. It's not absolutely necessary to do it, but that's just one of the kind of best practices, or at least what I think is one of the best practices of doing it. Anyhow, so what this will do again is, I hope I've answered the question, right? Is that okay? I saw a thumbs up from Himanshu, so I guess I did. But anyway.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, so this will just generate work items for me, and it will create them in a SQLite database. So I'll just I'll just run it. I will not really demonstrate the flow itself. It's out of scope of this demo. I'll just run it, but before I do, I'll just show you just that I don't actually have any unprocessed work item in my database. And then I'll run it. And as it runs, I'll take you through the other flow, which is called the work item processor. And that's the one that's important. That's the one that actually does all of the processing. So what this flow does is it picks up a work item from the SQLite database, and it processes them one by one by actually navigating to the Lego page, opening the product page, scraping the prices, doing some conversion and arithmetic functions to actually calculate the discount. And then if there are actually any discounts, send me a notification at the end of the flow. Now, when I built this, I've used our standard functions, standard subflows that me and my team have polished over the years. What this means is that we have a framework that we can reuse. And essentially, whenever we start a new project, we just copy and paste most of the actual subflows into this flow. And then we just add those that actually need custom stuff for the actual business case. What this means is that we can significantly reduce the time needed for developing a flow. I can build something like this within an hour. And then we also have, all of our flows built under the same structure, meaning that even though I've built this, if ever this was actually in production and a member of my team needed to provide support and maintenance to it because I wasn't available, they would still be able to easily navigate through this because it follows the same structure as everything else we built. Now, what this means is that it has 44 subflows, which is quite extensive for for a flow like this. But most of them are just parts of our framework, which used for setting variables, used for interacting with the SQL database, etc. And they're just essentially out of scope of this demo. I will not really take you through all of them. I will only show you the 5 subflows I've got ready here because they cover the essence of handling errors and logging in our flow. So, well, the first thing here and the most important thing, I guess, is the on-block error action. And we will have that in every single subflow, with maybe a couple of minor exceptions. Every single subflow will actually be encapsulated in an on-block error action. And what the action will do is it will set a log level to trace, which indicates a system exception. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. It will call a subflow called log to file, which is the essence of logging. And then it will continue to the flow run by going to the end of the block, which I'll show you. And it will obviously handle all errors. It will handle unexpected logic errors because we want our flows to handle every single exception. And These blocks will be set up exactly the same in every single subflow we have. So it's just a copy and paste throughout the entire flow. They're all the same. Now, when it continues the flow run and goes to the end of the block, it essentially goes to the end of the subflow, and it will exit. And that, together with the fact that it is actually done the same way in every single subflow, essentially means that every child subflow will exit on error, and then the parent will do some handling for the error. So that's the way we do it. The idea is that even though the onBlock error runs exactly the same in every subflow, the parent has the option to actually do some custom rules based on the business logic. So we might just want to escalate this further and just fail the entire flow. We might want to retry something. We might want to just skip a certain subflow or skip a work item, but continue to the next one, etc. That's handled by every parent, and that's the essence of it. We do onBlock error in every subflow exactly the same, but we have a parent with some rule. Now, the other thing that it does, as mentioned, it calls a log to file subflow, and this is the essence of logging in our flows. And as you've probably figured out by now, we log to plain text files. We log a JSON blob to a plain text file. So we do some text formatting over here for a timestamp so that it doesn't break the JSON structure. But then we also have some very important rules over here, which I'll just try to take you through. So first of all, we check whether the log level is equal to trace. And that, as mentioned, means that there is a system exception because that's only set in the onBlock error. While we use this subflow, we call log to file for every single log message we log. We might use other types of log levels for other messages where we explicitly call log to file just to log something outside of the onBlock error. But we only use the trace level for system exceptions. And that's what this means then, is that if it's trace, we have a system exception to handle. And we handle it by using the getLastError action. Now, if you're not familiar, this is a great action to actually get the details of the error. If you've ever run a desktop flow in debugger, and well, in the designer over here as a debug mode kind of a thing, and it failed, you know that there's an error, kind of a pop-up coming up at the bottom of the screen with all of the details of the actual exception that happened. And that's very useful when debugging. But when we run the flow from the console during runtime or from a Cloudflow or something, we don't really get that. We don't get those details, and that's a shame. So, but getLastError actually allows getting it. So what this does is it retrieves the details of the previous system exception, and it includes things like the name of the subflow that failed, the name of the action that failed, the sequential number of the action within the subflow, and the actual error message. And it contains all of that in an object that we can parse. So it's extremely useful. We can actually use this to get a detailed custom error message for every single error. And that's the general idea for doing onBlock error in combination with getLastError. It will essentially mean that we handle all errors the same with the same rules, but we still get detailed error messages for each of them. And we don't need to set them manually. Now, the next important thing is that we also, as mentioned, log all sorts of different other messages. We just, explicitly call log to file to log a message. And when we do that, we still want to have the name of the subflow in the message. Now, getLastError allows getting that for an actual system exception, but when there is no system exception and it's just a message that we want to log, we don't have that. And there is no native way in Power Automate Desktop to get a subflow name, so we need to set it. Now, previously in the past, we would just set it in every single log message, but we found that to be time-consuming and tedious. So instead, we invented a different way, and we use a list. So in the beginning of every single subflow, we add the name of the subflow into a list, and it's called a list, function names. And that's just because we're old school like that from way back in bin automation times when subflows were called functions. But anyway, it's a list of subflow names. And we just add the name of the current subflow into the list. And then at the end of the subflow, we remove it as the last item of the list. But if we call log to file from somewhere within the subflow, log to file will actually get it as the last item in the list. And what this essentially means is that regardless of how deep into the child subflow level we are, we can still always get the correct name of the subflow from which log to file was called by only setting it once per subflow, which is, well, we still need to set it, but it's still much less time consuming than setting it on every single message. And then the final thing in this subflow that I want to show you is a thing called a logger object. Now, I'm sure if any of you have actually built Power Automate desktop flows, or any RPA flows in general, you will obviously use an external config somewhere because you would want to have some of your values outside of your flow so where you can control them without modifying the flow. So we also have an external config, and within the config, we have a thing called logger object, which is used to define what we log. And we can control that without modifying the flow itself. So the object will have a couple of parameters. The first one is called log levels. And this one will actually control what we put into our log file. So if the level of the current message, which I've mentioned, it could be trace, it could be something else like error, warn, info, debug, etc. If that level is actually included in the log levels parameter of the logger object, then we log the entire message with all of its details as a JSON blob into our file. If it's not, then we don't log it. And that's an easy way to disable some logs if we no longer need them. So for instance, we frequently disable debug level logs after hypercare ends for our project. We don't need to actually modify the flow in production. We just need to modify the config. And then there's another parameter called error log levels, which defines what we send to an error recipient. So we have a subflow called send error messages at the end of the flow, which will send all of the error logs, if there were any, to a recipient, which is usually a business user, a process owner, someone like that. So they obviously do not need all of the logs because they would just get lost. Instead, we only send them what's relevant to them, and that's defined in the error log levels parameter. And if the current message is in there, then we add an item to a list with much less details, only the relevant stuff for them. And then this list will be sent to them in an email at the end of the flow. If it's not, we don't send it. And that's the idea of logging and controlling our logs via an external config. Now, as mentioned, we do log all sorts of messages, and I can demonstrate some of them in a subflow called convert price. Now, this is a custom subflow for the specific flow. All it does is it will convert the price that we've scraped from the Lego page into a numeric value so that we can use it to calculate the discount. So within every single subflow, we will always log a start message of an info level start message and an end message, which will just help us figure out which functions were or subflows were actually called. And if there's something wrong, then we can figure out what is the thing that's wrong. It just helps in debugging. We also sometimes log some non-sensitive variable values. So for instance, we have an info message that logs the price after it's been successfully converted. This also helps us, see if the variables were actually what we expected them to be during runtime. Also helps in debugging. And then we sometimes want to throw an error that is not an actual system exception, but is more of a business exception. We still want to handle it as an error, but there is no system exception to get. So when that happens, for instance, in here, if the price that was supplied to this subflow is as an input parameter is empty, we can't really do any conversions to it. So we throw an error. And we do that by setting an error message, and we don't really call log to file here. We go to failed, which means we exit the subflow and let the parent handle it. Again, we do the custom handling for each error in the parent. And that can actually be demonstrated in the execute webflow subflow, which is responsible for all web automation in this flow. So it essentially launches the browser, it finds the product page, it scrapes the prices, converts them, calculates the discount, and it processes each work item one by one. So it obviously calls a bunch of subflows, and it can have all of those rules. Now, it has a loop, but this loop is not actually intended to be used for processing work items one by one, because that's actually done by its parent called process work items. Instead, it's actually designed to implement a retry functionality. And what we do here is we loop from 0 to a maximum allowed error count that's also defined in config. And we do all of the web UI automation within this loop, and we allow it to retry a certain number of times. But if everything succeeds, we do an exit loop at the end, so we don't actually retry on success. However, if any of the child subflows fail, then we can do some custom rules. So for instance, we do actually have one custom rule over here. We call the subflow called get sales price, which actually gets the price, the discount price for a product. And if you remember the context, we actually expect this subflow to fail most of the time because we expect there to not be any discounts on those products. As soon as there is a discount, I get notified and I will purchase the product, and then I will remove it from the list. So in most cases, this will actually fail. But when it fails, we don't want it to retry. Instead, and well, we don't really want it to skip further actions. So instead, I log a message, but it's a warn level message, meaning it will not be included in an error log email. I log it, I clear the error message, and then I set the sale price to be equal to the normal price, which was retrieved earlier, so that the discount calculation can happen, but it results in a 0% discount, and it's not included in my email either. And it will just continue. But if any of the other subflows fails, for instance, the convert price that I've shown you previously, if it failed, it will do a next loop, meaning it will skip all of the further actions, go to the end of the loop, and if the error count has not been exceeded, it will retry. But before it retries, it does a couple of things. First of all, it will log the message. I could do a log over here, but it doesn't make sense. I just do it once over here instead of repeating the same code after every subflow. So I log a message over here. I log it at an error level because the trace level message will have been logged by the child, by the unblock error in the child subflow. I clear this, and then I take a screenshot. And that's also an important topic when it comes to user interface automation, and especially if you're building an unattended flow that includes user interface automation. It's recommended to take a screenshot because when you can't really see the screen during runtime, it can be a tremendous help to have a screenshot taken on error so you can see what the screen actually looked like when the error occurred. And you might see some things that you did not expect that pop up on the screen and might interfere with your flow. And we have a dedicated subflow for taking a screenshot, and that's because essentially we don't really want to take a screenshot on every error. We only want to take it on actual user interface errors. So I only call it from execute webflow. Within this flow, for instance, the work item generator flow doesn't even have this subflow because it doesn't do any user interface automation, and I don't need it there. I could obviously put it into log to file and just take a screenshot on every trace level error, but I don't need to. And instead, I prefer having it as a dedicated subflow. And then what it does, it also has one important thing over here. again, in config, the external thing, where I can control things without modifying the flow, I set a screenshot path. And if this path is empty, or if the directory doesn't actually exist, it will not take a screenshot. It will just exit the function. So that's, again, an easy way for us to disable taking screenshots if we no longer need them without modifying the flow. But if it does actually need to take a screenshot, it will just get a timestamp, format it in a way that's allowed in Windows file names, and then it will just take a screenshot and save it as a file. It could also be included in an email or whatever if needed. But for this, we only chose to simply save it as a file in network directory where it's accessed. Okay, and then the final thing that I want to show you within this flow is the way we format the log file name. And the reason that's important is because, well, as I've mentioned, write text to file, which we use to log messages, will actually create a file if it doesn't exist. And in the file name, we actually have a few parameters for a date, a module name, which is a flow name essentially, and a machine. So we will essentially be creating a separate log file per day, per flow, per machine. And well, I would recommend at the very least to have a file per day per flow. Machine is an optional kind of a parameter, but that's because I've seen some tutorials online saying that you could just do a single log file per flow, but I can totally disagree with that. And the main reasons why is because if you have a single file per flow, it can become huge pretty quickly, especially if your flows run frequently or if you log a lot of things. And it can be hard to navigate and find things in it. Also, if you have a file per day, it means that you can actually have archiving or deleting your files when they become old and unnecessary anymore. I actually have a default cleanup flow that runs on all of our client machines where it just archives old logs so they're not there anymore. So, but if you only have a single file per flow, that's not possible. It will just write into a single file. And if you ever want to do any sort of cleanup, you would have to manually delete entries from the file, which is obviously quite tedious. And then, per machine is an optional kind of thing, is useful with larger scale implementations with multiple machines running the same flow, especially if you push those logs to a network location where the different machines could interfere with one another when writing to the same file. So it's recommended to actually have a separate file per machine. Well, this is not really relevant for this flow, but this is just the standard functions again that we use. So it's there because we use that all the time. And what this will result in, essentially, is a file that looks something like this. Now, that's not really fun to read, right? But especially if you open it in Notepad or something like that. But since I've got it open in VS Code, I can do a trick like this. Just tell it it's JSON. It gives me some text highlighting, makes it slightly easier to read. But then I can also do something like this, which is format document, or just send Shift-Alt-F, which will make it a lot easier to read because it's a JSON file. It becomes significantly larger though, but still a lot easier to read if we chose to actually read these sorts of files manually. Again, we actually don't do that because we send them to a monitoring software. Right, so that covers this flow, and I'll just close it so that I can run it. I'll just come back to the console. It has, the generator has actually finished by now. I'll just quickly show you that we have some unprocessed work items now, right? We do have some for the products, and I can run the processor. And then as it runs, I can show you what I mean by monitoring those files. So again, this using these sorts of text files just to read them is not really fun. to just watch them manually, especially if they're just placed on the actual production machine and not on the network location. But instead, we can actually push them to a monitoring software. And for that, my preferred choice is the so-called ELK stack. If you're not familiar with ELK, ELK actually stands for Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana, which is a stack of products used specifically for the purpose of, ingesting logs, storing them, actually processing them, and then providing the user with an interface to actually view them, a web-based interface to view them remotely. I will not really get into details of how to set it up because that's out of scope of the demo. There's plenty of resources online that you can find. It's pretty straightforward. It's free to use if you have your own server to host it on. Now, all I will actually show you is the fact that I've got a service called FileBeat running on my machine, and it will just react to files being modified or created in directories that I predefine. I define them in a settings file for FileBeat, and I've got this error handling demo directory, it's the logs directory in there defined in here, which essentially means that if any log files are added to this directory or if any existing log files are modified, all of those modifications will actually be processed by FileBeat and sent to Logstash, where I can then view them in Kibana. And Kibana is a web-based interface which I can access because I'm within my network. And I'll just quickly show you a dashboard that I've built for the purpose of this demo. So the idea here is that I don't actually need to be on the same machine where the flow runs to see this. Obviously, I am on the same machine because it would have been tricky to switch machines now while doing the demo, but this is a web-based interface that can be accessed remotely. And, I've built this dashboard. It's, I'm not that great at doing visuals, obviously. I've just added some random charts in there just so that I can actually demonstrate the fact that visuals can be added here. They might make sense if you're trying to do some sort of reporting to stakeholders or something like that. I don't really care about that, to be honest. All I care about are errors. And I've got those errors in a table over here where I can view them. And I get them over there, and that's actually giving me a bit of a, let's do last 30 minutes. Cool, there we go. So that's giving me a clearer view of the errors that has been happening recently, right? And I can view these, and as you can see, all of these that have been logged recently are trace level logs in a subflow called get sale price. So that's what, as mentioned previously, took over my screen. That's where I actually expect exceptions, right? So this is all expected, and that just means that I've built a flow that actually works, and nothing unexpected has actually happened. But if there were any other kinds of messages over here, I could easily drill down, see the actual error message, and then decide on whether or not I want to log into the machine and then view what actually happened over there. But I can do all of that without ever accessing the machine. And I can even set up some alerts over here so that I'm notified of certain errors. Now, you might think that it doesn't make sense because I also get an error message at the end of the flow. But when you've got flows that run for a while, several hours, sometimes even, days, it can happen. You don't really want to wait for the flow to end before you see what's going on. So if there are errors, you might want to check on that without waiting so that you can intercept it and, fix it and then rerun the flow. And that's where this comes in because it shows the logs in real time. And we can just, access this while the flow is still running and see what's going on. And that's essentially the idea. To return to my slides, right. I've just got a few slides with just general things, key takeaways from the demo, right? So the backbone of handling errors is using on-block error at subflow level with exactly the same rules every time, and in combination with get last error to get the detailed error log. Having a logger object with, screenshots that and, and all of that stuff in an external config. And then having a log file per day per flow, optionally per machine as well, so that you can navigate these logs easier and be able to archive and clear them. And that's it. I have no idea why the slide is over here, to be honest. But if you would like to get more content like this, I frequently share it on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. You can scan this code, or you can find me by using my name, obviously. And I would absolutely love it if you could just take a minute to complete a quick survey. And if you scan this code, it will take you to a form. And because I'm a relatively new speaker, this is one of the first times I'm actually speaking in a tech event. I would love any sort of constructive feedback, regardless of whether positive or negative. I actually can learn from. So if you have something to say that would help me improve in the future, please take a minute to do that. And that's it. There are no further slides over there. So this is the time for Q&A if we have any time left and if you have any questions. I'll just keep this
5
over
minutes.
here.
So any questions, anyone do feel free to stick their hand up or come off a mute and ask away.
Just the first one for me, just to say, Agnius, that was brilliant. Thank you very much. I love how you explained it very clearly. And the design patterns that you've used are very repeatable and they follow good practices and keep things modular. So yeah, really, really good standard, a good approach that you're using there. Thank you.
I
Awesome,
really liked
thanks.
how you mentioned the reasoning behind you doing the lots and lots of child flows that are reusable. Not only are they easy for you to support and maintain, they're also easy for someone else to support and maintain if you're on holiday or in a meeting or something along those lines. And for a customer, that's the dream.
Yeah.
Like, no one wants to be the guy who answers the phone and says, "Look, I'm really sorry, this person's off and I can't help you." And you've basically solved it.
Yeah, that was the main reason why we invented the framework in the first place, essentially, because we've got a team and we didn't want to our customers to be dependable on a person who built the flow, because we might be on a sick leave or on vacation. We might, someone might actually leave the company, and then we still need them to work properly. So that's the main reason why we did that, but it's also very helpful when it comes to actually reducing the time needed for building a flow.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No one wants to spend all day building a flow when you can do it in an hour, like you said.
Yeah.
Yeah, use
Thanks
those building
for sharing
blocks.
that part. We've got a hand up from Hunter. Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, first I just want to say thank you so much for your guys' time and your contributions to the community. You guys are all heroes in my book. This has been very insightful for someone like me. I actually run a small automation business based on Power Automate for Desktop, and the client that I have, supporting roughly like 40 different automations. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I do not have a ton of air handling, especially at the expertise that you've demonstrated today. And this has helped me greatly to make it so that those flows are more sustainable, so that if something does happen to me, they're not hung out to dry, so to speak, on all their mission critical systems. So thank you so much for your time. I just wanted to say thank you before I head out. I am very sorry I have to leave a little early today, but I'm sure I would really hope that there was some way we could record this session and I could get a copy of it. I would love to hear what everyone else has to speak on. I was really looking forward to it, but I have an emergency to get to. So, but thanks
That's
again.
Okay. For everyone's benefit, the call is recorded, so you can catch up. Don't worry.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. Thank you.
Thanks for coming along, Hunter. Speak soon.
All right, see you.
Any further questions? I think that's us for now. Back to you, Keith.
Lovely. Thanks again, Agnius. That was really good. And if you do any further speaking, yeah, really look forward to that, because that was a really great session, particularly if you're a new speaker. Well done. Okay,
Thanks.
so next up, we've got Sarah Jones going to share some CV tips and a bit of info about the market and much, much more. So Sarah, if you'd like to share your screen there.
Yeah, this is the hardest bit for me.
That's fine. Anyone technical on the call? Yep.
Stuart's my go-to person with this, so let me just check. Let me get this working. Is that working?
Looking
All
good.
good.
Ready when you are.
Okay, fab. So firstly, thank you for the subtle approach to invite me to speak this evening, Stuart and Charlie. It's a great user group, so yeah, I really appreciate it, and I'm quite flattered that you've invited me along, so thank you for that. Right, is this going to work? Hang on. There we go. Okay, so a little bit about me. I am Sarah Jones. I'm a principal consultant at Shortlist Recruitment. I specialise in Power Platform recruitment, and I'm the host of the Power Up BRTs. I've worked in tech recruitment now for about 6 years, Power Platform for about 2.5. Fun facts about me, Keith and Stuart know have witnessed, I'm a fan of wine, music and food. Those things usually go together. You'll find me at the weekend in the kitchen with a bottle of wine, usually. So I was thinking when I was invited today, what do I want to talk about? You know, what do people want to hear from me? And I kind of wasn't sure what that might be. So I came to the kind of realization that there are things that I talk about every day. There's advice that I give to people every day, and there's questions that I answer. And I just thought that seemed like the obvious choice to go to. So firstly, market insights. I get that every day. What's the market like? Nope. CVs. Wasn't sure if this was a bit of a basic topic, and the CV landed on my desk this morning, and I thought, actually, yeah, you know, not everyone gets it right, and there were just some basic tips that I can give to help people maybe improve their CV, or not overthink it or not underthink it. A little bit of career advice on, you know, if you might not be thinking of a move now, this might be, you know, considerations you're making over, you know, the next couple of years, really, things that you want to really think about. Any hiring managers on the call looking to start to grow the team or having problems with retention, again, just some tips around that, and a little touch on community as well. So this data comes from an aggregator that we use called IT Jobs Watch, and it scrapes all the roles, IT roles in the UK that are on the internet, and it gives us some stats around those. So we use this for kind of benchmarking salaries and different things around recruitment. But it was quite interesting, actually. I did the research for today, and I kind of get a sense of the market, but I don't necessarily look at the data and drill down into it. And this top row here for the rank, that is where any role there is Power Platform in the title is ranked, you know, within the UK. So you can see last year was 77th in the UK. This year, that's actually got to the 37th ranked keyword in a job title in the UK. So that's a pretty big jump, to be honest with you. We are in a reduced market right now, and so you'll see that the number of permanent jobs citing Power Platform has reduced quite a lot. But that's a reflection of the job market as opposed to the Power Platform market. The most interesting thing that I noticed was the percentage of all permanent jobs advertised in the UK. The percentage of permanent IT jobs in the UK last year with Power Platform was 4.41%, but that's up this year. The percentage of the market is 6.25%. So kind of my take on this year, and this is my opinion, in fact, everything on this is my opinion, by the way, I have no authority on anything I'm talking about today. But from my view of the market, it has been that earlier on last year and early this year, unless it's a Dynamics 365 house, a lot of Microsoft partners were keeping an eye on Power Platform, maybe had a developer or two there to pick up any work if any came in from existing clients, but it wasn't really a main factor, main force of a practice that they wanted to develop. That's kind of changed the second half of the year. I've seen more of the smaller consultancies in particular starting to grow out their Power Platform practice and identify that as its own part of the business. And so there has been growth in a lot of business development, a lot of sales teams have grown, they're kind of trying to build a pipeline. And with that comes delivery resource as well. And so more jobs coming in that area. So I really think next year we're going to see a lot of growth in this space. I can kind of feel it coming, have a lot of conversations with biz apps leaders, and it feels like this is going to grow. And I think with that, with the push of the kind of ecosystem, mindset is end users are going to need to increase their recruitment for Power Platform developers, people to manage the centre of excellence. So I think that we're going to see an increase on that side in 2024 as well. Again, this is my opinion, but this is what I think is likely to come. I pulled the same.
That's your expert opinion. Remember the word expert.
Yeah, if you say so. It's based on conversations, it's based on day to day. Everything here is based on my day to day, and it all centres around Power Platform, really. Well, thank you, Stuart, for calling me an expert. I pulled the same stats on contract, and actually it's a little bit less exciting. It's not really moved. Contract market is more flexible for employers, and therefore in a market like this, it can boom at times. There are times when there'll be successful booms within contracting, but things are quite uncertain. People are cutting back on spending, and especially for the partners, a day rate contractor is going to be taken away from their daily margin that they're charging out to clients. So it's never been the most attractive way of recruiting for a partner. But again, I think next year, as end users ramp up their Power Platform teams, they're going to need some kind of contract resource. So I think that'll go up next year, perhaps not so much as the permanent market. So I mentioned earlier the CV 101, and there are a few people on this call I've had a conversation with similar to this, and there are just a few tips. This may seem basic to some. You might get something out of it. I don't know. I hope so. Okay, so my key points. So what I'm personally trying to find quickly is a story on a CV, especially on LinkedIn. There's a lot of applications come through, a lot are not a match on skills and location instantly. We can see that, but there are a number of things that will build up a story about a candidate for me. And that starts with, for me, education. And it might be that you went out of education into a customer service role or something that's nothing to do with your Power Platform role now, or whatever role it is you're in within tech. But it's still a story. You may have finished university in 2010 and you're now a Power Platform developer. So you just start your career point at 2015 because you were working at Tesco's for 5 years. And I want to see that, or if you went traveling, what were you doing? I want to see all the way through, and not necessarily what you were doing in that role. It doesn't have to be that level of detail. But where were you? Just bullet points, and then your last sort of, 7 years or 4 roles, a little bit more detail on that. Very quickly, I'd be looking for your skills and certificates. And this is one that's easily kind of forgotten. It'll be written into a profile. I'm great with Power Apps and Power Automate, but what Power Apps and what data sources have you worked with? That's not clear, and I don't think people necessarily realise that. Really clear at the top of the CV, a list of your skills, even if it seems something you assume is something I would assume is there, get it down there. And certificates as well. You know, you guys spend a lot of time getting your certificates and your badges, and show them off on your CV. It shows your commitment to your career as much as anything. And then I want to see, how have you applied those? What key projects have you worked on? What have you built? What was your involvement in that project? What have you achieved? And what have you delivered on? So they're the main things that I'm looking for, that's going to build a story for me for a candidate. And that gives me a very clear view. Do I want to speak to this candidate? Are they suitable for the role? There are a few nice to haves as well that you can get in there. So the kind of bonus points you get are for, you know, show off your passion. Do you go to any of the conferences? Are you a hobbyist? Do you play with these things in your spare time? Do you have certificate goals? I mean, most people I speak to, if they've just achieved one certificate, they know which one they're going to go for next. I spoke to somebody a couple of years ago, and it was about this time of year. He said, I'm going to do 10 certificates this year, and I'm on and I was like, that's so geeky. I love that. That is a real Microsoft geek right there. I want to speak to you. And yeah, so show them off, get it on your CV. And yeah, any community, you may or may not be involved in community heavily. You might not speak, you might not blog, but if you do, get it down. If you attend events like this, if you're a regular attendee of a user group, get it on your CV. You know, it might mean that you know a hiring manager that you don't realise you know. You know, you're speaking to somebody like me, and you tell me you went to Scottish Summit a few months ago, and you won a hackathon, and that's happened with an exact candidate, and it turns out that the hiring manager was running the hackathon and that person got the job. So just little things like that just make a sort of difference, and it can, you know, builds into the story that I tell the client about you as well. So for your next move, again, just my advice, and this is the advice that advice on, you know.
I think we might have lost audio for a second there.
Have you got me now?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Right, I'll carry on. Where did I get to? Was I in the slide?
Literally just your next move, and then it went silent. So just start sliding.
Okay, fine. Yeah. Okay, so I don't think I'd get asked in advance. It's not necessarily, the way I operate isn't necessarily trying to kind of go and find a person to fill a role. Something will come up and I'll think, okay, I know who's right for that. So I'll have consultative chats with people, and often that's, okay, what do you want? What does your next move look like? I'm surprised that people don't really know. So you might expect me to say, send me your CV, everybody, let's talk about opportunities today. But actually, my advice would be just slow it right down. You know, really think about what you want, and that's what's motivating you, what makes you tick. What you don't want in your next role is just as important as what you do want. So really take time, speak to colleagues, speak to friends, community friends, you know, someone like myself. You might get called by a recruiter who's really on the sell, you know, it's really busy, we need to get you out, get moving. Again, keep it slow. Remember what it is that you want, what's motivating you, and talk through those things rather than being kind of railroaded into something because people have got you all excited. Your tech stack, keep an eye on it, you know, understand what people are looking for. And if you are you might be coming out of an end user situation where you've been a SharePoint developer for 10 years and you've been using Power Platform for the last couple of years, Canvas apps, Power Automate, great. Okay, so you want to go to a consultancy that's offering Dynamics and Power Platform, somewhere like Curve, where they're going to want, you know, Dataverse and Power Pages, and so go and find out how you can kind of fill any gaps if you've got them, if that's what aligns with the next move that you want to make. And then to fill those gaps, I mean, there's loads of content. There's LinkedIn courses, there's Microsoft Learn, there's bloggers, YouTube. There's loads of ways that you can start looking at filling those gaps. So and ask people, ask recruiters, ask your MVPs, ask people that are in the sector that can kind of help coach you through maybe your next certificate, or give you some material to work on, some case studies or a brief to kind of go through. And as importantly as all of that, culture, and again, this comes right up to the slowing it down. What is it you want? Do you want somewhere that's going to give you a really good mentor? Do you want somewhere that's going to pay for your certificates? Are they going to give you the time to learn for those certificates? Do you need somewhere that's flexible around family arrangements? There's loads of things that you need to consider, and things have changed a lot since COVID with regards to company culture and what employers will let you do and what they won't let you do. And think about that as well. I appreciate I'm throwing a lot of questions at you. These are all quite individual things. So, it's just things for you to consider, really. So if you're looking at attraction and retention, again, some of this may seem obvious, but this is just kind of my experience. When I'm looking at a candidate, I want to know the motivation before anything else, before their salary, before the things that they want out of culture. What are they looking to move for? Why are they moving? And the top three, I couldn't call it on which one is the most popular reason for people moving. Tech is really important. You don't want to move away from the tech stack that you've invested your time into. So if that's slowing down, if that feels stagnant where you're working, if they're moving away from the tech that you're kind of expert in, and they're asking you to move into another area, that might be a reason why you want to move. They might not be giving you the time to train, or the funding to take training courses. And the lack of progression opportunity as well is a really big one. So if you're in a sort of company that's a flat layer, or you're the only Power Platform consultant, or there's no real plan to grow that, then that's an opportunity, that's a reason for you to be looking for something to move to. And that all gives you a kind of picture of what sort of business it is you want to move into. And again, it's the sort of thing I'd advise on. Do you want a huge, do you want a Capgemini, or are you looking for something that's a little bit more boutique and small? Would that suit your personality more? Does it offer more opportunity? Culture shift is another one. There's a lot of acquisitions going on in this space, as we know, and that will always cause some sort of culture shift, and it will put people's nose out of joint. Regardless, it's always going to be a result of an acquisition. So that's another reason why people will start to look to move. They might have a new hiring manager, a line manager. They might have just a change they're not comfortable with, and it just triggers the time to move on. Salary's right down there at the bottom, because if that's your only motivator, it's not a very good one, and it often isn't. And I do dig on this, because if someone phones me looking just for salary, I start asking a lot of questions around that. 9 times out of 10, one of these top 4 reasons is in there. They just didn't want to be negative about their employer, and they've just told me that it's salary. So if it is just salary, my personal advice to you would be, go and speak to your manager, see if they can give you an increase, rather than handing in your notice and getting a counter offer and staying anyway. That would be my first port of call with you before I take you through any kind of recruitment journey. And if they say no, and then they counter offer you, well, it's it's all a big waste of energy, isn't it, really? And then to any kind of managers, plan to retain. This should really, your attraction plan should really mirror your retention plan. They should be the same thing. They have to be connected. If you're trying to attract talent by giving them all of these things, all of this list here that I've just given to you, why aren't you giving that to your current staff? Or hopefully you are, but if you're not, you need to think about it. And that's where your talent team, HR, your CTO, or your head of biz apps, whoever it is, needs to make sure that these things are equally available to your current employees as well as your newcomers. So using that sort of information that we've kind of just gathered from motivating factors and what it is that people want, Build this into your advertising. There's loads of adverts out there. A lot of them are called Power Platform developer or consultant or solution architect, project manager, whatever it is. There's a lot of adverts that will just show you a similar tech stack to somebody else. They'll say that the company's great. First off, the most important thing right at the top of your advert, benefits and salary. If you're telling people that your salary is competitive, why aren't you showing them what it is? And I'll tell you why most companies don't show what it is. It's because they're not paying their current staff what they're trying to attract staff in at. And then that then takes us back to the retention piece. How are you going to keep those staff when new people are coming in on more money? And those people are going to be approached by recruiters offering them more. So salary, advertise, get at the top. Benefits as well. More and more people are interested in private healthcare now. Holidays are important to people, flexible working, remote working, enhanced pension as well is a good one to put on there. So get them right at the top of your job description. I love a story. You might have picked up on that, but I mean, in any situation that I'm in, and anyone who does any kind of sales on this call, I hope will agree with me that a good story helps to sell a product. Give me your background. Where have you come from? What's the past with your business? What's your vision for the future? And make that clear and hope, make it positive. Use those motivating factors. I don't write a job advert without a mention of progression or training opportunities. In particular, the tech is always on there, of course, but use that information you've got from experiences with previous candidates you've interviewed to get your job description attractive to those people. What's your brand? Are you on social media? Do you have, quite a cool, brand? Are you going down a certain route? Are you really pushing Power Platform? Are you pushing Azure? What is it that you're pushing on social media? And make sure that matches your adverts, job descriptions. And what's your feel-good factor? And particularly in tech, but more and more people want to go to work and feel like they're giving back and doing something. I'm going to work, feel good about it, proud of what I did today because what I did contributed to something good. So if it's not for profit, if you've got charity days, maybe anything that you do that you think someone will be proud of to come and work for you, that's a big one that people will spot in an advert and think, yeah, I'll apply for that. So finally, on the community thing, I mean, I got into this thing by accident in lockdown. I did a roundtable around Centre of Excellence in RPA. I was working with Blue Prism at the time, and I accidentally found out about Power Automate during that year, and it's come into this. It's come to this where I've kind of been included, by the Microsoft Power Platform community. People come on my VRT events and speak, and I'm really, really proud, flattered about that as well. And I suppose I just want to kind of say, if I can get into it and be welcomed into this community, then surely anybody can. So there's different routes into it, and the VRT is a route to many people who maybe haven't spoken before. That want to kind of test it out, do a bit of speaking. It's not for everybody, and some people will want to blog or just socialize, just get involved, and please reach out to me. I'm sure any of the guys running this session as well would be happy to help you kind of take a step into that community stuff as well. And thank you as well to everybody who has welcomed me, because I'm still not sure why.
I think we all feel like that at times, though. Like the amount of times, the conversations we've had, Sarah, where it's like, I don't believe that this community actually exists.
I know.
And you're right. Like they're so welcoming, and we're glad to have you. More importantly.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Well,
100%.
yeah, it's mad. It's there's nothing like it. And as I say, I've worked in other areas of tech, and I've worked in other industries before tech. I don't know of a community like this. People really, really go out of their way to help, and it's lovely. It's lovely to be a part of it. It makes the job a lot more interesting as well, and a lot more fun. So I didn't mention at the start I was going to do a competition, but my boss sent me home today with a bottle of wine. This, I think it's Argentinian shortlist. Can you see that? I can see on PowerPoint.
Yeah, looking good.
So just checking you're paying attention, really. if the first person to put in chat, Keith, if you can monitor this,
Sure
what's
thing.
the most important information that should be at the top of any advert? First to comment will win that wine. We'll send it out.
I think the winner might be Nigel Hamilton.
Yeah, we're getting some good answers in here.
Because I've got my screen shared, I can't really see the whole. Oh,
what's the answer?
Yeah, you tell us we can.
What's the answer? Have you not been listening?
We're just double checking we get the right thing here.
It's your competition.
Okay, benefits and salary. I'd accept either or.
James Friel takes it.
Yep, James Friel, congratulations. If you want to come off mute there, James, and give your acceptance speech.
So I shall drink it in honour of the people on the call. In one go as well, just for
on next month's event.
Yeah. But yeah, I just also what you're saying in terms of community, I think that's fantastic. I do. I've been in kind of in this for a while, and it's amazing how in the last 5 years it's just absolutely exploded.
Yeah, and it continues to as well. Keith and I were talking about some figures for the conference and how that they increase year on year by thousands.
One thing that would be interesting is the actual skill pool grown at all? Certainly when I was looking at this previously, it was like musical chairs. Essentially, there's a set group of Power Platform people who are just moving between partners. So just if you wanted a Power Platform person, you have to pinch it off another Power Platform partner. Is that still the case, or is there actually more people coming into the industry?
This is something I could talk all day about, James, actually, because there's this strange rule with some of the partners. They won't take from each other, but everybody wants a senior consultant already made and handed to them. So they are kind of the gold dust, I suppose, if you can get somebody who's full finished product that can build, that can consult, that's got end-to-end project experience. But there are some really, really good people in end users that have got excellent experience and excellent communication skills and stakeholder management skills that some of the partners will take over others. There is more coming in. I'd say there's more sort of junior levels, and a lot more of the partners seem to be bringing apprentices and graduates in, which is really good to see. It's something I feel quite passionate about, because where are these seniors supposed to come from? Who's investing in the juniors and the mid-levels? And I think we noticed that, before COVID, I wasn't in Power Platform, but we noticed that in the .NET space, that everyone stopped taking graduates. And we're like, but everybody wants a mid-level. So in 2 years, where is your mid-level coming from? So yeah, it's something I feel quite strongly about, actually, that you're going to build a team, build it robust enough to have a good senior, a good lead that are prepared to mentor and make sure you've got the capability to bring people up through the team. And it comes back to that retention bit that I was talking about earlier as well. How are you going to retain a senior developer? Keep them for a year or two and they'll move on. If you get a really good junior, treat them right, bring them up, train them how you want them and look after them. It's an investment for your company, but it's a bit of a rat race at times, and people are scratching around for the resource to deliver on projects. So yes, there's people coming in, but it's difficult to convince people that are up against it on projects that need senior resource to then bring more people and train them up. But it's definitely growing.
Just show the Lewis his CV and say, look, this kid's 18 years old and look what he can do. Don't poach Lewis from ANS though. He loves it.
Yeah, Lewis is brilliant, isn't he? Lewis was building solutions in sixth form.
He was building solutions a year before that.
Yeah. He did a round table. He did a VRT when he was in sixth form. He was one of my earliest ones. But yeah, brilliant.
I've just come home from school as well. I'm sure I was on that VRT. I think he still had a school shirt on. But yeah, that's when I've discussed like junior resources with our guys when we're looking at scaling up projects. It's always the same, like you say. We want a mid to senior. Like, where are you going to get one? They all work here or work somewhere else, but there's this person here who, like you say, an example, we had someone who came from Dyson.
I know who you're talking about.
Years. I think you do. You mentioned it earlier on, just not by name. Yeah, she came from end user. Won a hackathon run by the hiring manager who may or may not have been my boss.
Yeah.
And yeah, she was fantastic. She's gone from end user, relatively junior, to probably one of the strongest members of our team at the moment.
Yeah, she's fantastic. And I remember when I first spoke to her, she was like, Sarah, I just don't know how good I am. I just don't know. I've got no one to compare it to. And you know, the task is massive that they're asked to do, and it's a real investment if you want to go and work at Curve. And she loved it, absolutely loved it. She went off learning all these different things, and she really got stuck into it and smashed it. She had no idea how good she was, and as you say, she's brilliant.
She's also going to watch the recording tomorrow and be really, really annoyed I brought her up again.
Yeah, well, she deserves it. So,
yeah.
So I mean, I've come to the end of my session. There is my contact details on the screen here. I think you can see that. I hope you can still see that. I'm not very good at sharing my screen, as you know. The QR code will take you to my link tree with some different contact details. Happy to have open conversations. I hope you can tell that my approach is very low pressure. It's much more consultative. So if there's anything that you wanted to kind of run by me from any perspective of recruitment, retention, attraction, get in touch. And then yeah, just the Q&A now, really. I'll stop sharing.
Great. Any other questions for Sarah?
Angela?
Hi there, thanks Sarah, that was really interesting. I just wondered, we were hearing obviously the news and things, all the tech companies allegedly pushing everybody to get back to the office. Are you finding it's the same with recruitment? Are they always looking for local people again, or are they still looking across the UK?
In general, yes. In the Power Platform sector, the partner sector, no. It's pretty much a given with partners that it's remote with visit to client site at times. Some clients have a different requirement for the amount of time that you go to site, but the majority of partners that I work with don't need you in the office. So they're very comfortable with people working from home. End users are a little bit different because they might just have one or two Power Platform people in there, but the traditional IT team are going to the office maybe once a week, twice a week. It doesn't speak for all of them, but in general, because we do general tech at Shortlist as well, so we work in the Northwest predominantly, a little bit of London, a little bit of Birmingham, but especially in the Northwest, at least one day a month is the expectation. But they're all talking about now, how can we get people to come back into the office and socialise as much as anything. It's not necessarily bums on seats. I don't think we can really do that in the tech world, but definitely, yeah, for a culture and a socialising point of view, there'll be get-togethers. I know some of the partners are trying to encourage that with some more like, you know, learning days or pizza days or whatever. You know, go for a burger and a pint after a whiteboarding session or something. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
That's an interesting one when you go back to your kind of culture of bringing juniors up. I can remember at least 2 or 3 occasions in my career where someone has unasked looked over my shoulder, saw that I was in trouble, and sat down with me for 20 minutes and showed me to do something that accelerated my career by 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
But I was only able to do that because we happened to all be in the office. But if you're not in an office, if you're just a graduate, you might not have the guts to ask a senior person something that you think you should know.
Yeah. Yeah, we have it at our place as well. We work from the office most of the time because for the same reason. You can pick on something so much more quickly if you're in there.
I think we've got a responsibility as well, though. Sorry, just on what you were saying, James. Like, I don't consider myself any kind of big deal, but I would say I'm experienced, politely. I think we as experienced people have a responsibility to be looking after our juniors as well. Like, I fully get your point, like being able to turn around and say, here, mate, can you help me with this? I'm struggling, is much easier face to face. But we've got stand-ups and all these kind of things as well, where it's like, if someone's been working on the same 3-pointer for 2 weeks, one of the more experienced people should be stepping in and having a quiet word with them and saying, look, how can I help you?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that comes with any senior role in any role, you know, not just tech. I think if you want to be a senior, if you want to be paid a senior salary and considered senior, what's differentiating you from someone who's mid-level? You know, it's that extra bit of mentoring, and it's your stepping stone into leadership as well. And if you want to go into a lead position, so yeah, I totally agree with you there, James. Anything else from anybody?
Quick question from me, actually. Do you see a difference with hiring with a Power Platform and Dynamics? You know, we may get career switchers or people who are citizen makers or citizen developers versus maybe people who are a bit more experienced, per se, you know, with a code first background with Azure or .NET. Do you see any real difference, or is it just every candidate is different?
Yeah, it's a good question, because if I was working a .NET market, you can match a job spec to a candidate and it's pretty, you know, that's pretty cut and dry. Within this industry, there are a lot of different backgrounds sought after. So, you know, there's a lot that have come out of Dynamics that have kind of been working with Power Platform right from the start, because naturally kind of gone into that. And the same I say with like SharePoint, sort of naturally they've kind of picked up some of those Microsoft low-code technologies. Coming from .NET background with Azure, it's less usual, but it's good. It's, you know, that's a good candidate. Someone who really understands pro code will find something intuitive like Power Platform easier to pick up. So yeah, if you've got that pro code background and then you go and do some learning around Power Platform, you'll pick it up a lot easier probably, and I would rate that as a good candidate, to be honest with you. It's not a normal move. There's, I don't know if there's a bit of snobbery on pro code and low code, or if it's just that not exposed to it, because the low code doesn't often come from those pro code teams. It's a separate part of a business or an IT department often.
Got you. Thank you.
Varied backgrounds though in this space, so it's hard. It's hard to price people. You know, look at a salary and look at a candidate, and I can look for the words that I need to see. I can have a conversation, really draw those out, because some of the best placements I've made have been off awful CVs. And then you know, you draw the information, and you're like, oh my god, you're amazing. Why did I not have this written down? And you know, anyway, but yeah, it's still, I find it difficult to price candidates, if I'm honest.
I bet it's varied and interesting, but challenging as well. But no, thank you. That answers it. Thank you very much. Hi, Charles, mate. Yep, on you're next. Please carry on.
Thank you.
Hi, Sarah. That was really good, really interesting. Thank you. And you are an expert, of course. I have a quick question based on what was just talked about, which is, are there a majority of candidates coming from a specific area? Like, are the majority coming from SharePoint or something else? Or are they really that varied that you don't have the majority coming from something?
There's a lot come from SharePoint, actually. A lot SharePoint developers are kind of looking to kind of go fully into Power Platform now. And it can be quite delicate at times, because there are some skills that often aren't there that they need to kind of do some extra learning on. That's not a blanket statement, but often that can be the case. There's less movement. There's less, you know, you don't get so many applications. You don't get many applications that are right for the job anyway. You know, that's where writing a nice advert all comes from, because you might get a lucky one that's right for the role, but it tends to be building those long-term relationships and getting the right person when the time's right. And everyone wants something different as well. Not everybody wants somebody that's come from a Dynamics background, or, you know, it really is kind of matching up the right skill set to the right person. And you have to go looking for whatever it is you want, or know the people in the community that you work within to go and pick them up. So yeah, it's hard to say. I'd say there's probably more flow coming out of that background, because it's not as easy for them to get a job, if I'm totally honest, in somewhere that's using data first, building model-driven apps, and they haven't got that bit of experience yet. They need to upskill, and often people that are a SharePoint developer will be on the same salary as somebody who's come from a background that's got all the parts of the Power Platform, virtual agents and Power BI and everything. So it's hard to then go, well, there's a skills gap there, but you want the same money as somebody that hasn't got a skills gap because you're earning that money, and rightly so, you deserve that. But there's a little gap there for a certain client. It's not always the case, but I'd say that's probably the most. I can see all this banter going on in the comments. It's distracting me. Yeah, does that make sense though?
That makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. The other question that I have is to do with, I'm sure a lot of the people who are producing content on LinkedIn and blog posts and stuff like that, they get a lot of recruitment consultants contact them with job opportunities. And my question really is, do you have any advice as to how to figure out whether a company is worth going for an interview with or not worth going for an interview with? Say you don't have enough information from that job description to know whether it's a good fit or not. Like my usual ways would be check company's house, so check the details of the company, check the website, check Glassdoor reviews, that kind of stuff. But is there anything else?
I hate Glassdoor for a start. I'll just tell you that, Charlie, because I've never left a review for any. Well, have I? I've never left a review on Glassdoor. And Glassdoor is terrible. If you've got a contact centre and you've got Glassdoor reviews, it's always going to be awful. You know, because those sorts of environments are high turnover, and you'll get bad reviews. And most people will leave a company, you know, if you're moving on from your company and you have a leaving party and everything's happy, you walk away. You don't think, oh, I'll go and leave a review on Glassdoor for them. I don't know anybody that does that, but I do know people that have left disgruntled, which happens in all companies. And then someone will go and leave a bad Glassdoor review. You know, it's like if you go on holiday, I don't really leave reviews on holidays, but if I'd had a bad one, I'd leave one. So Glassdoor I'd stay away from. I think company's house is a good shout because you want to know you're going somewhere that's got a bit of money in the bank. You know, they're not in a lot of debt, they've got assets and some cash there. So that gives you a really good indication of the strength of the business. And ask around. I mean, this is a really open community, especially here. You know, you're not going to get blanked if you go to somebody that you've seen in one of the community events that you go to and ask them for their opinion on the place that they've been working at, then most people will give that to you. So I think that's probably the best way is speaking to people that have actually been in there. I think asking the sort of questions that I talked about earlier, you know, when you know what it is you want, you've got that that understanding of your own motivations, and you know what you want and what you don't want, and you're not going to get swayed by me or somebody that's working as an agent for you. You know what you want, or you know, you talk it through with someone like me, go away and go, okay, this is what I'm looking for, and I won't settle. I don't want to go to, you know, somewhere that's got something that's on my no list. So really understanding what you want is the first thing, then do your research, absolutely. But I think the only way you can truly do that is speak to somebody that's working in that business or has worked there that can give you some insight. But don't go on Glassdoor.
Yeah.
One of my favourite things to do is to approach people I know who work somewhere and ask them what the worst thing about working there is. Because 9 times out of 10, human nature, people are polite. You say, what's it like working there? Oh, it's great. I work there. Asking them what's the worst thing, like a couple of the answers I've had is, I live in Scotland in the office in Birmingham and it's rubbish, I can't go for pints. If that's the worst thing about working somewhere, it's a pretty good place to work.
Yeah,
unless you're a Scottish person who can't go for pints in Birmingham and want to go for pints in Birmingham. But yeah, like everything that Sarah said and what James mentioned as well, just ask people. Someone will know someone who works there. Or go along to events and things as well. The job I'm in now, I actually made the decision to go to them after meeting them at Scottish Summit. There's more and more companies that are going to Scottish Summit, South Coast Summit, and they like bright colours as well. Have a chat and see what they're like face to face. That's always done me well too.
Yeah, definitely. There's plenty of opportunity to meet people.
Yeah. Any more questions?
Did I get through that really quickly, or did I do okay?
No. You've got 2 minutes left until the next speaker, so did pretty well actually.
Thank you for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
No problem at all. Thank you for coming along.
Sorry for not
back
dressing up, Stuart, but you were supposed to too.
Yeah, you won't be back. Thank you for the present, though.
Oh yeah, okay, you're
For
welcome.
James.
Yes, I need to get an address.
I've dropped you both a message on LinkedIn to get your heads together. When one of you respond, I'll leave it and you can sort out addresses and stuff.
Perfect. Thanks.
Enjoy your wine, James. And back to you, Keith, to introduce our next speaker. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thanks, Chip. Excellent. Yep, thanks very much, Sarah. That was absolutely fantastic. So up next, we've got Josh. I'm really looking forward to this one. First time speaking for Josh, I believe. Excellent. So if you want to go ahead and share your screen, and we'll let you know when it's showing there.
Yeah, thanks, Keith. So yeah, bear with me a minute whilst I get this sorted out.
Sure thing. Take your time, bud.
Let's see. This is
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
Looking great.
perfect. Great. So yeah, so hi everyone. Hope you're having a spooktacular evening. Excuse the pun. Yeah, so my session is around exploring app convergence within model-driven applications. Just before we get into that, just a couple of things I want to go through. So just a little bit about myself. So firstly and foremost, I'm a Power Platform enthusiast. I think, you know, most people on this call are, but, you know, do really enjoy everything Power Platform. I'm a big Lego fan. You know, you could probably see some of the kits behind me. So yeah, anything Lego is amazing. I'm a new speaker, so yeah, like you've mentioned, this is my first time speaking, so you know, go easy on me. Hopefully, you know, I won't make any mistakes. Yeah, and lastly, just kind of a few things there as well. I forgot to mention, so I'm a solution architect at Bridgel. You can reach out to me on socials. There's a QR code there if you want to kind of reach out. I also blog as well. My website's on the screen there, joshlgiles.com, and I just try and put out regular content just to try and improve my writing and kind of share my love for the Power Platform. So yeah, I just want to say a good kind of big thank you to the organisers, you know, Charlie, Keith and Stuart for hosting this tonight. You know, their efforts in putting these together are greatly appreciated, and giving people like me an opportunity to speak, you know, it's amazing. So thank you, guys. So onto the agenda then. So really just want to kind of cover a few things around app convergence in Power Apps. So first thing we'll look at is what actually is app convergence in Power Apps. We'll then move on to why you should consider converging apps. And then we'll look at the types of kind of app convergence you can do and the considerations for each one. And then we'll move on to a demo. Hopefully that'll work okay. And then we'll finish up with a bit of Q&A. So also you'll maybe notice some of the slides I've hidden some pumpkins just to kind of make it a bit more spooky. And yeah, they're not very hidden, but you know, just to add a little bit of kind of fun to the session. So
do you win a bottle of wine if we find them?
What was that, sorry?
Do you win a bottle of wine if you find them?
Well, there'd be a lot of bottles of wine to give out, so maybe Sarah can help with that one too.
More points.
Yeah, so what is app convergence in Power Apps? So really it's the merging of different Power Platform technologies. So historically you had in one camp Canvas apps and in the other camp model-driven apps. This is bringing both of them together so that you can create kind of tailored experiences within a model-driven app and allow kind of flexibility where we didn't have it before. And to achieve that, we make use of arguably four, but I've just mentioned three things in this session in particular, and that's custom pages, modern command bar, and low-code plugins. So why should you consider converging apps? So before we get into what they are, why should you consider it? So the big one is a flexible approach to development. There's really minimal need for pro code at all, if at all. It's really efficient because you can use PowerFX logic, build familiar interfaces, and use the tools that you may be kind of familiar with if you've kind of developed Canvas apps in the past. It's very minimal user interface design. If you take a custom page, you can build that interface once and reuse it across different solutions and projects. Things like modern command bars and low-code plugins. You can take that PowerFX code and reuse it time and time again and expand on it. So, really quick and easy to do once you've developed it once. Again, leveraging the strengths of both Canvas and model-driven apps. So both options are exceptionally good at doing what they do. Model-driven apps, data-first approach, very good with data. Canvas apps designing that kind of UI from the ground up to create that really kind of tailored, customized interface. So bringing them together, is a great thing. And probably the most important one, which people can often overlook, is maker empowerment. So giving makers the ability to do and make things with the tools of their choices is something that's brilliant and allows them to develop those solutions how they want to. So moving on to our first type of converged app, we have custom pages. And these are a page type in model-driven apps, and we can create full page kind of sections within a model-driven app. We can create kind of dialogues, flyouts, or side panes with them. They're really flexible as well. So if you want to kind of start going into the pro code territory, you can use JavaScript and TypeScript to really expand the capabilities, such as passing parameters so they could be context aware, that kind of thing. And Microsoft Learn has some really good documentation on getting started with that. You really don't need to be pro code or know much about JavaScript or TypeScript to kind of get started with it. So yeah, it is always an option. And again, it's a fully customizable experience. You can use that kind of familiar Canvas app designer that we all love or maybe hate, depending on the day. So, it's fully flexible in that regard. So some considerations for custom pages then. And the biggest one for me is a custom page really needed? So before you start using a custom page, really sit and think, is this the right option? Is there an out-of-the-box option that might suit better? There's a lot of functionality within model-driven apps, and there's a lot of out-of-the-box things that you can achieve with that. And, most of the time you might find something, but sometimes you won't, and that's okay. And at that point, look at a custom page to kind of bridge that gap and that functionality. You have to design a custom page really with a unified UI and UX in mind. So we all know what a model-driven app looks like. It's set out a very specific way. You want to make sure that your custom page is designed with that in mind, so that it really kind of creates a seamless user experience for the user. You can use different data sources with them as well. So, you're not limited to Dataverse like you are with just a standard kind of table. We can pull in data from anywhere really through the Canvas designer. So, if you're wanting to pull through SharePoint to custom page, then go ahead. I don't know why you would, but go ahead. The option's all yours. Again, like I mentioned, you can enhance them with JavaScript. So, there's so many different things you can do with that, such as passing the parameters, defining what type of page you want to open. And you can be really flexible with that as well. So, there's options. I think there was an option presented on the monthly Power Platform community call a couple of weeks back around how to open them more efficiently and in kind of one fell swoop rather than having to do for each different types of pages. So lots of community content out there as well on how to kind of enhance custom pages with JavaScript. And lastly, is security. You know, if you're able to use Power Effects, different data sources, you really want to be mindful of how that impacts the security landscape within your application. You know, if you're using different data sources, you know, is that going to cause problems? If you're developing with Power Effects formulas, how is that going to impact things? So just something to keep in mind if you're developing a custom page. So moving on, we've got the modern command bar, and these are customizable actions for your forms, grids, subgrids, you know, and associated grids as well. And essentially what it does is it allows us to create buttons on the command bar using familiar Power Effects language, which is really nice because we now don't have to rely on JavaScript to create these. It's a really low barrier of entry as well, because again, you don't need JavaScript for it, no custom code. You know, if you know Power Effects, you can build a modern command bar and use that really familiar expressions and language that you know and love. So the considerations for modern command bar is that you can't customize the out-of-the-box buttons with it. Yeah, hopefully one day we'll be able to, but we can't at the minute. I'm unsure. You might be able to do that within the Ribbon workbench, but certainly can do it using the modern command bar kind of functionalities. I always find it quite tricky to run Power Automate flows through command bar buttons, because you can't just say, you know, click a button and run a flow. It's not supported at the minute. Hopefully that'll come in the future. Some alternatives I find with that though is, you know, creating maybe a separate column in your Dataverse table that, you know, when that changes, you run the flow, or causing the command bar button to open up a custom page instead, which will run the Power Automate flow. So there's options and workarounds for that, but it would be really nice to have that kind of like native functionality to run a flow. Something else to consider is it creates a component library when you create a modern command bar button. So all your buttons will get contained in a component library. So that's just another component that you'll need to maintain and look after, you know, and can grow. So something you need to be aware of. And again, security, you know, we're using Power Effects. We can do quite a lot of things with that. So you just want to be mindful of kind of what you're doing with that and making sure that you're doing the right thing and you're not doing anything untoward with it. So lastly is low-code plugins. These are kind of the new kid on the block, really. They're still in preview, but yeah, the kind of functionality these offer is really nice. So we can create real-time business logic with these, again, using Power Effects language, which is really nice. We've got options to create instant or automated plugins. So if we want to create an instant one, you know, we can call that via a Power Automate flow. We can call that in the Canvas app, you know, that kind of thing. Automated options, which include, you know, on creation, update, or deletion of a row, we can run that logic. You don't need any complex C# programming skills for this. You know, traditional plugins needed C#, and you know, I don't know C#, and it's great that I can create a plugin using this low-code plugins option. So it's really nice. A couple of kind of new things that have come into low-code plugins is the ability to use connectors. Now this is huge because it now means we can tap into all of those connectors within, you know, what we were able to access in Canvas apps, for example, and Power Automate. We can now use low-code plugins for that. I think that's going to have real big benefits in the future when this goes kind of GA. And also you can't do that in C#, so it's really nice to see that they're kind of really investing in this area. And also they're now solution aware, so we can actually transport these through, you know, our ALM processes, whereas previously you couldn't. That's a really nice feature now that we don't have to worry about recreating them in downstream environments. So yeah, that's really nice to have. So some considerations for low-code plugins then. The first one is the Data Accelerator app. So this isn't as big a deal as it was because this is now installed by default, or it should be installed by default in most environments. But but you used to have to install that before using low-code plugins. The second thing is improved performance. Because we're executing the logic on the server, it reduces the amount of data that needs to be transferred between the client and the server, and that's just going to give you faster processing times. The scalability, so because it's server-side, it can be scaled more easily, and again that allows for better performance and handling of larger workflows going forward. It does introduce another layer of complexity though, so again, something to be aware of. You've now got another app that's there, you've got all of these potential plugins that are sitting there that you need to manage and look after and make sure they're not interfering with maybe other solutions or other components that are being developed. And lastly, again, security. You're given access to that connection library, you're given access to power effects, that's a lot of power, so we just need to be mindful of that, maybe look into things such as DLP if you're going to roll this out, towards a group of makers, and make sure that you're working securely. So yeah, I guess the kind of important stuff now would be the demo, so I'm going to try and bring that up and share that, and hopefully this goes well. So let's see how we can do that. I think I've got it here. Perfect. Get this set up properly. Okay. So Charles, did you have your hand raised up there before I jump into the demo?
Didn't, no.
No, sorry, I thought I had seen a hand raised up. Sorry. I'll crack on with the demo. So firstly, I just want to kind of run through how to add a custom page to a model-driven app. Fairly straightforward to do. Most of you might know how to do this already, but always nice just to see how to do it, and then we can kind of show how that looks once added. So I've created this demo app here called Event Management. It's a really simple model-driven app with some tables in it. And to add your custom page to this, all we need to do is just click New, and then select Custom Page, Next, and then decide whether you're going to create a new one or use an existing one. I've already added it because I was obviously making sure the demo worked, so I'm going to add it here. So what you can see here is I've added the custom page. I'm going to play the app now, and you can kind of see what that looks like when we play it. Loaded. So yeah, obviously, typical standard out of the box model driven app kind of experience. It's taking you straight to this contact table, but within this custom page, you've got some nice things going on. So I've just created a bit of a mock-up using the contacts table as my kind of guidelines. And what we see here is, we've created an interface that is fairly seamless to the existing kind of model-driven application. And that's what I was talking about when we need to create these custom pages with UI and UX in mind, because we really need to make sure that they do kind of feel and look the part as well. So I've just added a few things in here. All the functionalities have to be built from the ground up, obviously, because it's a custom page. So, we can see things like, the views are being pulled through, and, it filters this nice modern data table. I can search. Everything kind of works, but it's not, not done for me. I've had to implement that. The other thing is, using things like the modern controls, the creator kit components as well, and that really kind of enhances that experience for, your end users. Some of this stuff is still in preview, some of it may not be stable, but if you can find the ones that are and work well, then I would suggest you use it, because it does make a real difference in that kind of look and feel. And another thing that's really nice with custom pages is the ability to actually have multiple screens, much like a traditional Canvas app. So, you want to consider, you don't want to be creating a full-blown app as a custom page. But if you're going to create an experience where, like we've got here, we've got a view or a data table, and I want to maybe edit that item, I can click on that and click edit, and that's going to open my next screen, which is that kind of contact form. And again, this is built from the ground up, but it looks and feels very familiar, and that's what's going to really allow people to kind of extend and do what they want to do with that. But this template can be reused in the future. We can basically just take this and point at different tables, or want to customize it and do really kind of fancy things which Canvas apps allow us to do. I can do that here. It's really nice. And I'll just show an example of how I've kind of customized this to show a pop-up. For example, if I edit the experience, so I already detect that there's a change in the first name. That's fairly straightforward. If I click back, I'm going to get a nice kind of modern pop-up that asks me whether I want to actually save that or discard it, because I've not saved it. So I'm just going to discard that and go back. So that's kind of a bit of a whistle-stop tour of like a custom page and how you can use that for model-driven apps. So next up, I will show you modern command bars, and hopefully this goes well. So I'm going to close that down. So the use case here that I'm going to demonstrate is around just basically we've got two tables, one for events and registrations. A contact can register for an event, and they'll get added to the registrations table with the contact name, the event, and whether they've attended or not. So what we want the command bar button to do is basically for all selected registrations for that event, we just want to mark them as attended. So quite straightforward stuff, but hopefully a good kind of demonstration of how you can use these buttons to further enhance experiences. So to do that, we'll go into the editor of model-driven apps again, and if you click these three dots, there's the option to edit the command bar here. So we click on that, and there was those options I was speaking about earlier. So we can add them on the main grid, the main form, the subgrid, or the associated view. In this example, I'm going to use the associated view because I want to go into the event and then see the related registrations and be able to mark those as attended. So if I click edit, this is going to open up the nice modern command bar designer for me. You can see all these kind of legacy buttons here that we're used to. We can't do anything with them, so they're just kind of sitting there waiting for the functionality to be added that we can actually go ahead and edit them. So I'm just going to create a new button, and then you'll see there's two properties. There's on select, and then there's visibility as well. So you can actually change how these should show. So we can control, things like should they be visible if you're in a security group, for example, or should they be visible if the item has been selected, that kind of stuff. So some nice things you can do with the visibility. I'm just going to leave it to show for now. And then what I'm going to do is on the onSelect, I'm just going to patch those selected records in a efficient manner. And I'll give credit to Scott Dory for that, because he had a great YouTube video on how to patch fast items for the modern command bar. So here's one that I did earlier. I'm just going to copy and paste that code in. What you'll notice is the kind of editor here is really bad. I can't expand that. It's horrible. But if you're that way inclined, you're creating large formulas, you can open it in the component library and you'll get that familiar experience to be able to expand it. So what we're doing here is, again, we're just patching that registration table, and for all the selected registrations, we're just going to mark them as attended as yes. So I'm going to save and publish this now. And fingers crossed, this will just kind of work and I'll be able to showcase the functionality. If it doesn't work, you'll just have to take my word for it. But I did test it earlier and it did work. So let's let this save and publish. Perfect. Now I am just going to exit here and upload. Publish for good measure. Probably don't need to do that, but I always like to anyway, just force a habit. And I'm going to play the app again. So if this works, we should now be able to go into my list of events that I've created. I should be able to go into this sales event, for example. And I should be able to see the related registrations. And hopefully I've got some in here, and I do. And it's not shown up. We'll refresh and see, but if it doesn't, I'll move on and you'll just need to take my word.
I've sometimes seen the command bar taking a little bit longer than usual to publish. New command up top there.
It can be pretty slow at times, so sometimes you just got to give it kind of a few moments to come through. So that's probably a bit of a caveat with this. It's not always instant. You know, most things in model-driven apps don't seem to be instant when you're trying to publish them. You know, you've got to wait a little bit for it to publish. But yeah, in essence, you know, you'll just select that. Your button would be there. It would appear. I would click that, and then it will just patch all my registrations to attended, and that's the outcome. So I'll move on to low-code plugins next as the last kind of port call. So to access that, we go through the Dataverse Accelerator app, which we should be able to access in here. I'm going to play that. This should load up shortly.
We think to mention as well, the Dataverse Accelerator app, this is a custom page that you're looking at right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really nice. It's, again, you know, it looks like part of something out of the box. It's fantastic, and it's a good kind of showcase of what you can do with custom pages as well. So you know, there's lots of kind of areas where Microsoft have developed these solutions, or PowerCat have developed these solutions that look just like, you know, native experiences.
All credit to the field service team who built the first custom page, and then shared it with the rest of the Power Platform team, and now we have these.
Yeah,
field service did it in 2019.
So we'll create an automated plugin, sorry, and what we want to do is basically pre-validate a form to basically say if a date of an event is before today, then don't let me save and basically throw a validation warning on the field. So we'll just call this event date validation. It then lets me select my table. I'm going to select events, and then I want to run this plugin when the row is updated. And again, I've got some nice handy code which I created earlier. I'm just going to paste that in. And one of the key things here is to make sure that you're running this pre-operation. So we want to run this validation before we save the form, because we're obviously wanting to make sure that it validates it before saving. So I'm just going to save that now. And you know, if you're wanting to get into low-code plugins, there's some great documentation on the Microsoft Learn site about it, with some great examples as well, and some good walkthroughs and how they can be used. So thoroughly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. So that's it being created. Now we'll see if that's going to work. Now, my testing earlier, it was very temperamental, and I'm just going to put that down to the preview nature, but it should work. So we'll have a go. We're going to go into events. I'm going to create a new event now. and then I'm going to select the date and time in the past and see that errors, and it doesn't. What should happen is you would then get basically validation under your field to say that the date can't be in the past. I found the latest implementation of the Accelerator app, the Dataverse Accelerator app's been a little bit buggy, so it might just be down to that. So something to keep in mind is preview, probably don't be using it in production instances, but it is really nice, and have a play around with it because it's going GA very soon, I believe. So that would be really nice. So
supposed to be December for GA. I think it may get pulled off because it's still quite buggy, like you said. Question, mate, just super quickly while we're stopped on this one. Would you have expected that to run without saving the record?
Yes, the whole point of the pre-operation is basically to run in the context before the record gets saved, to allow for those pre-checks, if you will, before saving.
Yeah, I'm just thinking old classic workflows, you could run them before saving and bring things back, but you had to press the save button. So you'd fill it in, you'd have 4 errors on it, you'd press the button to save and get 4 errors back. Right, that's not great. Whereas with these, are you expecting something similar to a business rule where you change it and it just gives you a message straight underneath? Computer says no.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's basically what that's demonstrating is what a business rule can do. But it's a good kind of example of being able to do that in low code, really. If you want to validate forms, you probably should be using business rules. But there might be a use case where the low code plugins will take that kind of crown.
Or maybe you just can't be bothered waiting 20 minutes for the business rule editor to open. It's becoming the new advanced find. It's getting ridiculous these days. But yeah, it does sound really, really cool, mate. For the moment, I've been using classic workflows in the save or going down the road of JavaScript, and it's not great. Like, it takes ages. You've obviously got reusable stuff that we've been using for years, but who wants to be writing JavaScript all day when you can do 20 characters of PowerFX to do it?
Yeah, absolutely, and it kind of goes back to what I was saying about maker empowerment, letting people have the option. If you're comfortable with JavaScript, go ahead and use it. But if you're not, these are alternative options that will be, that you can use or will be able to use once it's all properly kind of released. So I'm going to stop sharing and go back to the slides now. Hopefully this works, and I can do that. And it's probably going to go to the start again, but we'll just go right to the end. Where are we? Okay, yeah, so that kind of concludes kind of what I wanted to show, really. So I'll just kind of open the table to some questions from anyone.
It's not so much a question, but just a thing. I know I'm a massive fan of modern commanding. I think it's just the business. And one thing I found really useful is the fact that you can nick the icon and the JavaScript from a standard button, but then use PowerFX for visibility. Because I was trying to figure out, display rules and enable rules for some fairly complex stuff, and my mind couldn't deal with it. But the ability just to be put in some fairly easy, for me, PowerFX, that use the same icon and the same JavaScript is a really handy tool to have in your tool bag.
Yeah. I've done something similar recently, actually. So one of our customers hates model-driven app forms, which is really annoying because they love model-driven app grids and they love filtering and everything apart from forms. So just like James said, we took the details from the new button. It pushes into a custom page that's in line with whatever they like. And you run that button and you simply use navigate. You're not even bothered about JavaScript because it's taking you straight to an embedded page, and it just works. That's the thing.
My question is this: I don't know if anyone's going to answer this. So I detest embedded canvas apps and model-driven apps with a vengeance. Do we see the possibility of having embedded custom pages within a model-driven app page? rather than having to have it up at the kind of dialogue on the side. So we can use those connectors and pull in data sources as part of this convergence.
Yeah, I can certainly see it that way. I think the day of the embedded Canvas app, in my opinion, is limited. You know, I don't really see much of a use case in what I do day to day with them. You know, custom pages are certainly more prominent, so I'd expect to see their use cases expand as we go kind of down the road.
I think I agree with you as well, James. Like, embedded Canvas apps, when it comes to ALM, they can fully get in the bin. Like, it's not even worth attempting. We had
it just felt
an old solution
like such a stopgap.
Yeah, the pipeline that we use to find the embedded Canvas app ID and then insert that into the solution, customizing the XML through a pipeline. There's more involved in that than there is in importing the solution. That's not right in this day and age. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, I would love to see something like that as well. Almost being able to put them in like a PCF control would be fantastic. For a wee example, PCF style controls, like we've got a map that we use for one of our customers that we built through a PCF that's quite complicated, but basically all it does is displays a map similar to the big map from with two lines. One from where the customer's offices are, and the final one being where they're going to. And it almost looks like a Google Maps route map kind of thing. The PCF is ridiculous in terms of the amount of code that's involved in it for what it does. You could do that in a Canvas app and embed it, but it's just not worth it from an ALM perspective, quite honestly. Any other questions from anyone? No. Just before I hand back to Keith, really well done, Josh. Really enjoyed that session. You would never know this was your first speaking session, mate. Absolutely smashed it.
Thank you.
Great job.
Totally agree.
So yeah, back to you, Keith.
That's great. Thanks, Stuart. Okay, so yeah, just to echo that, fantastic job. Well done, Josh, and to actually give live demos a go. Kudos, that was fantastic. Great job. So next up, we've got Graham. So looking forward to this one as well, Graham. Fantastic. The screen is showing perfect. Over to you.
Keith, and yeah, thanks Keith and Stuart and Charlie for basically inviting me along to speak tonight. So yeah, my name's Graham Donnell. I am going to speak tonight a little bit about Sales Copilot. So I just wanted to start the session off, and also well done to the other speakers. Hopefully my demo will go smoothly as Josh did, and really interested to hear from yourself, Sarah, and Agnius as well at the start of the session. So yeah, just a little bit about me. So my name's Graham Donnell, as I say. I started my Dynamics journey back in 2013 as a functional consultant. Essentially what I did then is worked up through a couple of roles to a senior solution architect role, and then I moved to the slightly darker side of pre-sales back in December 2020. I'm currently fulfilling the role of pre-sales lead at Incremental Group, so that involves me looking after our team of pre-sales consultants, but also getting my hands dirty in a pre-sales role, speaking to our customers, working through their requirements, picking the right technology for them, and basically supporting them through the sales process. I also launched my own blog. It only seems like last week, but crazily, it was back in September 2021. It's d365ni.co.uk. So you'll find it on my LinkedIn page. You'll see my page on the right-hand side as well. What I try and focus the blog on is just trying to simplify some of the content. So I write quite a lot of functionality around release waves. I cover a little bit of CE and a little bit of Power Platform, but I try and develop series of content rather than just random posts here and there. So I try and get bogged into a particular content, a particular topic, and run a series off the back of that. But essentially what I'm here to talk about is Copilot. And I grabbed this slide just to give a little bit of preamble into what Copilot is. I'm sure everyone's LinkedIn feed, everyone's Twitter feed, any social media feed that you have, if you follow technology blogs, your feed is going to be absolutely swamped with AI and Copilot technology, AI content, AI features that we're talking about. The reason I picked sales, I appreciate it's not within the Power Platform space specifically, but the Sales Copilot is probably the most mature of all of the Copilots, certainly the ones that I've had some experience with playing around with so far. But in terms of Copilot, essentially it's the merger of three main components. I have a little analogy that I'll finish this little slide off with in a second. But those three main components are an app of some kind. So although I'm going to show you Sales Copilot tonight, the event app that Josh just showed us could equally have its own Copilot module. You have Copilot for Power Apps, you have Copilot for Power Platform tools, you have Copilot for almost everything now. But fundamentally, each Copilot is built in the same way. It has that front-facing app, which is where we'll put in our prompts, we'll put in our questions, we'll put in our natural language to get some information back. That prompt is then processed or modified using an LLM, which is basically a large language model. So these are chat GPTs of the world or natural language processing tools. And then to essentially give back some meaningful response, there needs to be a data source of the information. That could be your Dataverse, it could be a SharePoint library, it could be your website, it could be a SharePoint list, whatever the case may be. Of course, in my scenario tonight, I'm going to be running a sales app which utilizes Dataverse to store all of that information, and the Copilot will then provide me with that prompt and response functionality that we'll have coming back and forth between the user. But essentially, Copilot needs data. In the same way that our car needs petrol or diesel or electricity to run, Copilot needs data. It also needs relatively well-structured data. So I want to kind of dispel a myth that people will just think, let's plug in Copilot and let's get using it. That's really not the way it's intended to be designed. And essentially what I've built tonight in the demo are two scenarios, one with a very, very small piece of information and one with a much more detailed piece of information. And you can see how stronger it is once you have tangible, structured, and meaningful information in your solution. So what problem does Sales Copilot solve? I'm in the lucky position that I worked as a functional consultant for 7, almost 8 years. The vast majority of customers I worked in that time had an implementation of Dynamics 365 Sales. And what we would have seen, and I'm sure anybody on this call who's either used Dynamics Sales, either deployed, sold, whatever the case may be, a common theme that you may have seen across those implementations is, what's in it for me? And this is a question that a user would often ask. It's a question that they will say, well, I'm being asked to use this solution. I'm being asked to pump all of this information into your tool. I'm being asked to track my activities. I'm being asked to move my opportunities through a sales process just so dashboards look good, just so my team managers' reports look good, just so our forecasts look good and our pipeline. And although those are valuable things and those are important things for someone to do, fundamentally for that sales user, there may not be a massive benefit to them as an individual. So what Copilot for Sales is really looking to do is bridge that gap, present information that's relevant to the user, and really give them information at their fingertips that is useful to them as an individual on the given lead, the given opportunity, the given account, whatever the case may be that they are working on. So that arrives us at the demo stage. So how does this all work? So that's enough slides. I will come back to them, but that's enough slides for now. So what I've created here is just a dummy record in the Sales Hub. And the scenario that I'm trying to paint out here is that a lead has come into our process. It could have come from our website, it could have come from a shared mailbox, they could have picked up the phone and called into the organization. Fundamentally, though, what we're going to have at this point is very limited information. You'll see in the left-hand side here, I have a topic, I have a first name, I have a last name, I have a job title, and an email address. So not a lot of information to go on. Moving over to the details, I have an industry, I have a description, annual revenue, number of employees. So not a large amount of information that I can actually use as an individual, and also not a large amount of information that my Copilot solution can use as well. But let's see what it looks like when we actually do push this into Copilot. You'll see that it natively appears from the right-hand side panel that we use for lots of different tools. Now Teams integrations appear here, omni-channel functionality appears here, and Copilot certainly appears in the same way. First of all, you'll see that I can summarize my lead based on the information that I have captured so far. So what I can see is the lead was added 6 days ago. Straight away, I wouldn't have known that from the record unless we showed the created on date on the form, of course. The lead is interested in Dynamics 365. I can see that from the topic. The lead prefers to be contacted by all methods, email being their preferred option, and it was sent in or was processed through our website. You'll also see that it will go off and do almost a duplicate detection style piece of functionality, and it will recommend contacts that it thinks, based on the limited bit of information we have, that may exist within the instance as well. And then I just wanted to quickly look at some of the prompts. Now, at the moment, there isn't that ChatGPT style functionality. I can't really type anything in here. I can type something in, or I can just use the pre-created suggested prompts for that. I'm going to go through these in a bit more detail as we go through, but this is an example of what I can do. So I can prepare for a meeting, and you'll see that I have an appointment in the timeline just in the center. I can summarize the lead, and you can see the summarization of the lead just on the right-hand side, and I can show recent changes. So this is almost like an audit history to say what fields changed, what did they change from, what did they change to. I can get latest news for the account. This won't actually give me anything at the moment because you'll see I don't have a company linked. I don't have any information to actually base that news information on. And you can see some other functions within that as well. But what you will notice on the timeline is this particular activity, this particular lead has been engaging with maybe a marketing contact, maybe someone from our business development function. And I have a little bit of an email history here as well on that. So although it's not telling me a great deal on the right-hand side about this lead, I can go into that email thread, and I'll just quickly scan down, and these are just a couple of emails that I sent back and forth. Copilot now tells me something completely different, tells me something a lot more detailed. It says Graham has asked for information about D365 sales and customer service. He was provided with links to the relevant websites, and he was offered a meeting to discuss this further. So straight away, as a sales manager working on this lead, as somebody who's maybe working on behalf of a sales manager, the account has changed hands, someone's on leave, whatever the case may be, rather than reading potentially pages and pages of emails, I now have 3 bullet points that I know Graham's interested in sales and customer service. He's already seen the websites, and he wants to have a meeting to discuss that functionality further. So straight away, it's given me that summarization of the information that's contained within that. Now, what you can do at this point, hopefully, is imagine the scale of this. Let's say this email thread's been going on for 6 weeks. Let's say we've been emailing backwards and forwards every day for those 6 weeks. There's a lot of information that we would have to trail through to find that. The summaries of those emails are going to give us that bullet point, give us that information readily available at our fingertips. What I would do now as a potential sales manager or someone who's working on this lead is take that information and look to reply to Graham in this instance. So I'll hit the reply button, and this will generate a new email for me. Now, what I will say at this point, I'm not assuming that people will use the email tool within Dynamics, but everything that I show you here today is also available in Outlook. So you can see the same email, you can see all of this content, you can see the Sales Copilot add-on working in Outlook, as well as working in the Dynamics 365 Sales Hub. So what I can do is, again, I'll get my little summary. This is the summarization of the email thread. And what I can start to do now is ask it to create a draft email for me. Now, there are a number of out-of-the-box options. It will offer me to send a proposal. It will offer me to send an inquiry, send some detail. But what I can basically do is, let's just say, right, an email asking for a meeting next Wednesday. And what this will do, as the little thing is running, we'll draft that email, will give me that content, and it will say, "Hi Graham, thanks for the information, very helpful. I'd like to set up a meeting to discuss further. Would Wednesday next week work for you?" What I can do is hit add email in the bottom, and it will take that content across into the actual email body. Now, if I don't like it, I can ask it to regenerate. I can ask it to be more specific. I can say Wednesday at 2 p.m. I can say Thursday at 4 p.m., whatever the case may be. What I have noticed, however, and this isn't a massively documented feature, it will actually check your calendar. So it will look for the first available slot. And I've tested this with a few dummy instances. I've moved calendars, appointments around. I've come back in and regenerated, and it will look at a free slot in your calendar. So not only is it using Dataverse information, it's using M365, Microsoft 365 content as well to propose not only a meeting, but a meeting at a time that will work for you. So what I can do now is hit add to email. Comes across, I can tweak it, I can change it, I can add a little bit more personalization to it, and I can go ahead and send that off to Graham. What that means now is I have a tailored email thread where I found out all of the key information. I've then responded to that email in a much quicker and probably a much more professional way, rather than scanning through an email, trying to find the salient points. I now have a bit of information that I can take into the next stage of the process. So that's what Copilot looks like for that initial stage of the record. I can pull out some information, I can link it to contacts, I can go into an email thread, and I can see all of the key bits of information that are coming out of the solution. What that gives me is a summarization of the record, and it gives me the ability to summarize emails, find the key points, and then respond to those key points appropriately. It will then look to pull in some information from the existing email thread, some recommendations, maybe pull in information from my calendar to find availability. And essentially what I've done now is understood who this lead is, understood what is exactly being discussed with them to date, and replied to them with an email that uses all of that information to show that I have carried out that analysis, I have carried out that work to understand who the company is and what they're actually looking for. So that's the initial stage. I will circle back to just talk about the importance of data and how you can see, even with some basic data points, a very, very simple email thread and a bit of information, we can really start to get tangible information, bullet point information that we can then use as part of our sales process. So the initial benefit to the user there is summarizing those emails and extracting that key information to them as an individual. Now, let's fast forward 6 months. So we've spoken to Graham, we've qualified the lead, we've sold him some business. He is now essentially an existing customer, somebody that we have great knowledge of. But let's fast forward 6 months and a new lead has come in from Graham. He wants Dynamics 365 consultancy. We have all of his information. At this point now, we are connected to an existing account, an existing contact. So it's a much more consolidated lead. There's a lot more information that we have gained over that 6 month period through that initial sales cycle. So now we have a lot more detail that we can actually use Copilot to analyze for us. So let's look at Copilot now at this point. So straight away, a lot more information. Graham Smith is an existing contact with Belfast City Council. He was added 127 days ago, so straight away I know that we've possibly done work. He's interested in Dynamics 365 consultancy, prefers these methods, came in through the web, and I can also see that there is an existing opportunity for consultancy work, which was successfully closed in the last 6 months. So that was the previous lead that we just went through. That was that first piece of business that we worked with Graham on. I can also see that there's currently one other open opportunity for a support contract. So it sounds like we've delivered something, and it sounds like they're being interested in being supported in that piece of work. So again, all of this information is now readily available to me. I probably would have had to go to 3 or 4 different parts of the system. I may even had to have reached out to someone internally to really get that synopsis and really get that high level detail. So now I'm ready to pick up this new lead. Again, I could be a new account manager. I could be someone new to the organization. I could be someone new to the account. So what I want to do is then get the latest news for the account. So I'll just simply use that prompt. And this is beneficial when you're preparing for meetings, when you're going into a new customer, you want to find out, well, what's in the news about them? What information is useful? How can I sound like I'm engaged with the account? How can I sound like I'm knowledgeable within that? So straight away, I'll maybe want to go in and say, you know, there's news stories about food hygiene offences within Belfast. I will say this was shining Belfast in a better light a couple of days ago when I ran it. There wasn't talk of a mouse-infested kebab shop 2 days ago. So please do not judge Belfast. Please come and visit. It is a wonderful city. But basically what this will do is now another data source where it will go off and essentially run a Bing search for you and pull back some news sources of information that would be relevant to you. So I could now, as a sales manager, take a piece, thanks Keith, I could now take a piece of information from these news story and tie that into my narrative, tie that into my discussion with the customer, and essentially use that to build rapport, build a better relationship with them. Again, I have timelines here of activities which I could use. So one of the other prompts is that I could prepare for upcoming meetings. So I've scheduled an appointment for today just to show what this brings you. This I felt that this would be a little bit stronger, if I'm honest, when I first showed this. Essentially, what it will do is give you some key points to consider for that up-and-coming meeting. Where it talks here about focusing on product, pricing, timelines, issues, and solution, essentially, these are agenda points on the actual appointment record. So it's not maybe giving us a lot of analytical information to use, but it's essentially reminding me that these are the points for the agenda. These are the points that we promised to discuss as I was going through that particular meeting or as I'm preparing for that particular meeting. The other options then that I have at that point are just what we've looked at. So the summarization of the lead, as you can see, it's a lot more detailed at this point. And I can even then look at some recent changes for this so I can see, well, how have we moved through the process? Of course, it doesn't give me that, but that's not to worry. But the main thing that it will give us here now is that historical information. So let me just run that summarized lead again. And let me just pick the one that we are working on. It will give me that sales information. So it will give me the fact that an existing opportunity exists. It will give me exact details of closed opportunities. And in the essence of usability and usability of the solution, I can click on these records now and go directly to them in the main window as well. So it's not as if these are just reference points or pieces of information. I can now go and see, okay, this is the opportunity that we won. We sold them consultancy, we sold them project management, and then on the other opportunity that we looked at, the support contract, I can also look at that and see what type of support contract we've been offering, what type of information, what type of products they're interested in. Essentially, it's scraping these records and pulling out the key points so I can look and see what information is on this particular opportunity and the details that I can use. So now I'm getting that holistic, that helicopter view of the account. And this again plays back to what we hear customers talking about. We want that single view of the customer. Often that's really difficult to achieve because you have information from so many different parts of the solution. You have account information, you have opportunities, you have products, you have activities. So really getting to that single view of the customer is tricky, but having something like this that tells me the products the customer's interested in, showing me the opportunities that they have, allows me to move through the system a lot easier. So what I can do now is using all of that information, manage this opportunity or this lead in the same way that I would, and I could then just simply go ahead and qualify that. What this means now is we can then use all of those same prompts, all of that same information on the opportunity screen. And I do have
you're on mute, Graham.
Sorry, apologies. Thanks, Stuart. So yeah, we can qualify that lead in the exact same way as we would historically. And now you can see we get a summarization of the opportunity. So the customer, the budget that they have, what they've spent with us over the last 6 months, what that purchase actually related to, the stage that the opportunity's at. So again, it's pulling out those key bits of information for me to actually show that content. So fundamentally, that's Sales Copilot. A lot of the concepts, though, are very applicable to the other first-party applications and the Power Platform tools as well. It's very much about having that prompt. So summarize this opportunity, having that large language model to then take that natural language, couple it with your data source, which in this instance is the Dataverse supporting this application, but it's also pulled information in from my calendar. The news has been pulled in from a Bing search, and I could plug in other data sources to help give that real consolidated set of information within the overall solution. So just to sum up, let me just go from here. What do we see tonight then? So essentially we saw the ability for Copilot to summarize records. So take a long email thread that's been going on for weeks and weeks and weeks and summarize that information into a bullet point form for us. We were able to see the recent changes of our record. So essentially, when did the record move from opportunity status A to opportunity status B? What information was updated? What changes were made as we went through the process? It was able to then reach out to external sources and pull in company news. So what's the most recent bit of information that's been posted online about a company? How can I use that in my sales process? How can I use that in my engagement with the customer? The drafting of emails, we have prompts, but we can also just manually type in. So that was that natural language processing piece where I was able to type in, send a reply and ask for a meeting next Wednesday or ask for a meeting next Tuesday at 2 p.m. We were able to prepare for meetings. As I say, not a lot of functionality within this. It really just takes the agenda points and plays them back. But again, important to be able to remember what we agreed, what was aligned on the agenda, what points do we need to do for that. And really the scenarios for use is everything from day-to-day sales management. So those scenarios were very, very focused on a user coming into the solution, picking up a new lead, finding out the information they needed to, and moving the lead through their own sales process. But you also hopefully seen a lot of real strong scenarios where a handover of an account, someone going on leave, someone being off sick, last short notice or last thing, being able to then not necessarily rely on a sales handover, but use the tool to give you that information that you need for a traditional handover or a traditional way of picking up that record. There are loads of resources out there. I could have had 50 slides on resources. There are some here which are relatively recent, some that are more focused on Copilot in general, so ways that you can see it being used right across the stack. There's a fantastic blog here by a guy who runs D365NI, which talks about it at the early stages. You will hear some content where it talks about Viva Sales. This was essentially an early name of Copilot. So anytime you go down a rabbit hole and you see Viva Sales, it's essentially the same product. A lot of you will know Lisa Crosby, I'm sure. This is just a fantastic YouTube video that she ran recently, probably a few months back now, but it feels like recently, on essentially Copilot in general. So it's not even really focused on that sales element. But if you type Copilot into Google, you will get reams and reams and reams of resources that you can utilize. So just the last thing from me then, any questions? Any part of that you want me to go over again? Anything that's triggered an idea in your head? I am not the Copilot expert, but I will try my best to answer anything that you may have.
First up, thank you very much, Graham. That was very slick, very great presentation. And I always love the practical use where you can see it's going to save you time, or for me, speaking personally, it's going to give me a summary and catch things that I may have missed if I've done it manually, you know, trawling through emails, trawling through things. So yeah, lots of practical uses. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's loads that it goes out into the wider ecosystem as well, Keith. So I could have showed you some of the Teams functionality. Unfortunately, I'm on Teams, so I couldn't take you into that. But in the same way that it can summarize an email thread, it can also summarize a Teams meeting. Now you're going out into some of the conversation intelligence stuff within Teams, but it has saved my skin on a number of occasions where you have a 2-hour meeting, you come out of it a little frazzled. What the hell did we talk about? What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to take away from that? Going back and looking at keywords, looking at dates, even analyzing some of the recording or going back through some of the recording has been an absolute lifesaver recently for me. And it's just an extension of how you would track your Teams meetings into your sales solution and how you would then use Copilot to essentially analyze those.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Stuart.
Quick question from me. Is the Sales Copilot currently capable of creating records? I know the field service one, for example, can create work orders from Outlook. Can the sales do that as well?
Not at the moment, Stuart. So basically those prompts that you've seen on the right-hand side, so it's all about summarizing records, finding news for you. So there isn't anything other than the drafting of the email body, which obviously creates a temp or a starter for 10 for you. There isn't anything that will physically create a record for you at this stage. That may come with a little bit more of the natural language processing, where you could say, create an activity against this lead, or create a reminder to follow up in 2 days. Then you would get to the point where you're actually creating records as opposed to summarizing and analyzing records. Yeah.
Certainly looking forward to that. Like the amount of times, as you say, you're on a call and there's key points that come up that you're just going to forget because there's so much going on in a 2.5 hour workshop. Being able to rattle in half a sentence and it's created a reminder for you. That's the way forward for me.
Yeah,
for me is if anyone's ever implemented sales, and all you have to get, you're actually just begging the sales guy, just track in CRM. That's all you need to do. Just press one button, and they won't do it. With this, it's going to give them a bit of a more incentive to do it, because then you can just hit summarize. So yeah, if you've been dealing, trying to close the deal for 6 months, nothing happened, they go quiet for a year and then they come back, hit summarize, and suddenly you've got that list. Anything that can persuade sales guys to actually use the tools is always a good thing.
Yeah, I can't echo the opening statement enough. What's in it for me? That's really what I tried to frame the entire demo around, is how can we use it to get information that I, as a sales manager, I'm going to use to help on a given lead, on a given opportunity. So yeah, very much focused on the user and how it can benefit them as an individual. But any of the co-pilots that are out there, Stuart, you mentioned the field service one, it's the exact same. How does it help that technician? How does it help that dispatcher, that scheduler, that person who's working through 50 work orders and trying to plan 10 technicians a day? Same for customer service. How can someone search a knowledge base or get Copilot to search a knowledge base to then send a response back to a customer on a fix for an issue that's known to the organization? So yeah, it's all about that user experience, I find, when we've been working through it.
There's so many really good use cases as well I've seen in the customer service space. So particularly, customer calls up and says, I have a problem. The classic thing is, do you have notes on what I've discussed already, or do I need to start again? And 9 times out of 10, you're going to want them to start again, because no one wants to read 20 pages of notes. Click that summary button. Yeah, I can see you phoned up last week about this. We gave you this advice. Has that worked? Just like that. I really like this. I'm really looking forward to.
I think
it's free in the UK now, aren't we? It's just bloody expensive, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, to get Copilot as part of sales, you need essentially a sales premium license, so it's built into that. So it's whether or not you can justify. You don't really want the tail to wag the dog. You're not going to buy a premium license just to get Copilot when you're only using Sales Essential or Sales Professional functionality. So there is that aspect to it. But yeah, it is bundled with a lot of the first party app licensing if you go for that premium level. But yeah, it's the fastest move. And I think that article that I put in the resources, I think I wrote that in June when it was still called Viva Sales. It's now changed name. It's got a licensing model. It's got 50 new features that it didn't have in June. So I'll probably have to rewrite that article at some point. But yeah, it's certainly the fastest moving area of Dynamics and Power Platform. Yeah.
I'd be interested to see how many of this.
The release wave plans, and about half of the release wave for sales is Copilot.
Yeah, it's got its own section. Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see how many Salesforce people buy it, because it does work with Salesforce as well.
It does, yeah.
So if you've recently lost a sales dynamic sales sale, you can now go after with Copilot.
Yeah, I made a point of blurring out sign into Salesforce when I was writing the blog when you set up the configuration. So yeah, it's a bad word in this space, James.
Yeah. Can't believe you said that word in front of all these people, James. You should be ashamed.
We've recorded this too.
Runs in Azure. Microsoft get the money either way.
Good point.
True. Very true.
All joking aside, though, yeah, I have seen a lot of Salesforce people thinking about Microsoft a bit more. I do worry that this is going to have them thinking about Microsoft a tiny bit less. But some of the AI stuff we've been demoing to customers recently, they're like, where was this 10 years ago when I couldn't be bothered doing this job for 10 years? You mean it just does it for me now? Well, no, it helps you do it, but almost.
Yeah. I think showing the two data sets, so sure, is good because it gets rid of that myth that customers say, well, I'll just get a Copilot, it'll do everything for me. If you don't have a lot of information, it's really just going to tell you what's already on the form. It's going to tell you when the lead was created. It's going to tell you they want to contact via email. But if you've got that history of emails, if you've got that sales history, those opportunities, even those orders, those invoices, everything within the Sales Hub, it's then going to give you a snapshot of that customer in that little side panel, and it's a real strong advert for it when you can show them that versus just a few fields that you could look at anyway. So yeah.
Does it tell you on the account if they've got overdue invoices?
I don't honestly know.
Okay.
Sure, it will tell you that there are invoices there if you have them linked to the account in the same way it showed you the opportunities. I don't know if it will specifically say ones that are overdue.
But it is extendable. So if you have specific industries, so like be looking at things like accountancy, where there's a specific set of rules. If you're auditing a company, there's certain things you can't do, and that's the kind of thing you want to flag straight away. So you can extend it to do specific checks and specific data sources.
Yeah,
I've got a particular customer that wants to stop selling to people who don't pay the bloody bills, but salespeople will sell. And they've tried all sorts of different things, from custom PCFs to pop-ups on the account through custom pages to say, look, stop selling stuff to this person, stop giving them discounts. They haven't paid for the last piece of work they did yet. And I feel like the Copilot's saying this person's got 20 grand in overdue invoices. People who just want to sell, they're going to use the Copilot. They really are. Like, it's going to make their life easier.
Yeah.
It would be nice to see something like that.
Yeah, I think maybe where that could go, Stuart, is when you start to see a little bit more of the natural language processing. So you would ask, does this account have any open invoices? Does this account have any overdue invoices? It'll be an interesting test to put an invoice in, let it go past its due date, partially pay it, whatever the case may be, and then just see what the summarized account or summarized lead gives you then at that point.
Yeah, I think it'd be nice of that on the AI side when you're doing the kind of opportunity scoring. If it downscored opportunities that didn't pay, there's no point saying you're 100% chance of winning this, but you've also got 90% chance of not getting paid.
You obviously could do work in public sector, James.
I think Donald Trump's lawyers.
Yeah, I'm saying nothing. Yeah, really good session, Graham. Really enjoyed that, Matt. We do have about 5 minutes left. Does anyone have any other questions?
Was it just banter in the chat, or was there anything in the chat that I missed?
Yeah, no banter. Don't eat kebabs in Belfast, basically.
Yeah.
That's your Copilot summary.
That's my Copilot summary. It had lovely stories 3 days ago. It was talking about investment. It was talking about new jobs. It was talking about this. Of course, on a demo, it talks about mice-infested kebab shops, but hey-ho.
Just don't Google Fife. That'd be a lot worse, I can assure you that.
Well, yes, yeah. Cheers, Charlie. Yeah, I'll have you a game sometime. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Okay.
Cool.
Perfect. Well, Keith, back to yourself.
Great. Yep. Thanks again, Graham. That was an excellent presentation. Again, so many practical uses. It's really great demos in there. So, yep, I'll hand over to Stuart just to wrap things up.
Yeah, so I'll keep this brief because it is nearly 9 o'clock at night. Just want to say thank you to all our speakers. Thank you for everyone for coming along. And we'll be holding our next event most likely mid-December. So if anyone is looking to speak at that event, reach out to myself, Keith, Charlie, etc. And we'll look to get you signed up. Recording will be available tomorrow. We'll get it all sorted out and sent over as soon as we can. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, and see you next time. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Cheers, folks.